Chapter 408. Su Yi's speed was getting slower and slower, but the thunder and lightning in the sky were getting more and more terrifying. At this moment, Su Yi's every step was very slow. Every step Su Yi took seemed to cause the entire secret tower to rumble, oppressing the void. The light on his body was getting dimmer and dimmer, destroyed by the thunder and lightning. Su Yi's body was on the verge of collapsing, as if he would be blasted off the secret tower of heaven at any time. On the last 10 steps, the light around Su Yi's body had dimmed, and he was surrounded by the thunder and lightning. The terrifying power swept over him, causing his body to sway and his face to turn pale. The pressure that others could feel was already so terrifying, and Su Yi, who was in the middle of it, was even more clear about how terrifying it was. The invisible pressure came from the outside, crushing everything in its way. It was pervasive, as if it wanted to tear apart the body, crush the soul, and finally destroy Su Yi's will. Pucci, finally, under such terrifying pressure, Su Yi spat out a mouthful of blood. His legs went soft, and he almost fell off. "Freeze!" Su Yi roared, and his aura exploded. Like a god of war, he stomped on the ground fiercely and continued to stand proudly. Boom! At this moment, the heavens and earth trembled, as if there was a demon roaring, causing everyone's heart to palpitate. Su Yi, come on, you can do it. Asterisk read the original chapter. Part hashtag on the 3rd level of the secret tower of heaven. Zhang Qing looked up, clenched his fists, and shouted loudly, hoping that Su Yi could hear him. Su Yi, come on, go to the 7th level. As Zhang Qing's voice fell, a disciple immediately echoed. Among the outer disciples, there are also terrifying and amazing people. Come on, Su Yi, come on. Within the crowd, there were many disciples cheering for Lin Feng. Although the sound waves were drowned out by the thunder and lightning, they were still able to spread out. Su Yi continued to climb the stairs, but it was extremely strenuous. Su Yi took another step, and the sky ascension platform rumbled. Resplendent arcs of lightning enveloped Su Yi's body, drowning out everything. PFFF, Su Yi once again spat out blood from the corner of his mouth. The pressure crushed his will, crushed his soul, and wanted to tear his body apart. It was as if 100,000 mountains were crushing down on him. Su Yi's heartbeat quickened, and he was almost out of breath. The pressure was too vast and boundless. Su Yi gritted his teeth and continued to step forward. Step by step, his aura surged to the heavens. It was as if he was resonating with the heavens and earth, shaking the void. Too powerful, the disciples below trembled and shivered. Their fine hair stood on end and then stood on end. At this moment, this young man was just like them on the heavenly platform, advancing and retreating together with him. They were all excited. PFFF, at the last step, Su Yi spat out a mouthful of blood. The light on his body had already dimmed. Su Yi's gray robe was also bleeding from the inside out. Cracks had appeared on his body, and his diamond body had also been crushed. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Su Yi's body finally bent a little. He stood up with difficulty, dripping blood all over his body. He's injured. He's reached the limit. It's too difficult. Even if he's short of the last step, he's already a monster. A disciple spoke. It was not difficult to imagine the terrifying pressure. It was too powerful. To be able to reach the last step was already extremely terrifying. The last step is even more terrifying than all the previous steps combined. In the distance, a powerhouse from Shunjian Gate spoke. His eyes were like torches. It seems like one step, but it's actually a natural moat. An old figure's eyes were shining. He was shocked. On the towering mountain peak, the right protector quietly clenched his fists. He looked into the distance and said, "The last step? Is it going to stop? It seems like one step, but it's a world of difference. It's the last step. Can his kid still hold on?" Situ Liuyun's eyes were like a sea of fire. Su Yi's back was slightly bent. He was being suppressed by the power from the outside. Blood kept dripping from his mouth. His face was pale. However, at this moment, Su Yi's deathly pale face was still fearless. A faint smile even appeared on his face as he grinned, revealing his blood-stained teeth. He looked even more ferocious as he muttered, "This is the final step. Do you think you can stop me?" When his voice fell, Su-Yi removed the broken sword from his back in front of everyone's eyes. Clang! The broken sword fell to the ground. Su-Yi held it in his left hand and supported it on the steps beside him. Boom! At this moment, Su-Yi's back was straightened again. The supreme origin technique in his body was activated to the extreme. His whole body was shining with light again. A terrifying aura spread out from his body. Rumble. As if sensing Su-Yi's purpose, the void above the sky-reaching platform was filled with thunder and lightning. The dazzling electric arcs became more and more astonishing. They gathered together and formed a ball of lightning. Accompanied by the fierce power of thunder and lightning, the electric arcs were accompanied by a monstrous aura. It was incomparably terrifying, as if it was going to destroy everything. This is the gathering of the heavenly might. It's a warning. If you force your way in, you will be killed. On the towering mountain peak, Situ Liuyun's eyes flashed with a dazzling light. At this moment, his face was solemn. "Kid, you've reached the end. Don't force your way in. Otherwise, you will be killed." In the distance, the experts of Shunjian Gate were trembling. Everyone could feel the mighty pressure at this moment. The ball of lightning was no longer stopping. It contained killing intent. If one could not resist the heavenly might, they would be killed on the sky-reaching platform. Come on! Su-Yi's body was once again wrapped in the red light. His left hand broke the sword and stood there, looking down on the world. The god of war was fearless. Roar! With a loud roar, Su-Yi suddenly raised the broken sword in his left hand. He took a step forward and immediately stepped onto the 7th level of the sky-reaching platform. Boom! At this moment, the heavens and earth shook. The wind rose and the clouds surged. The mountains and rivers trembled. Not good. At this moment, the disciples on all sides of the sky-reaching platform could clearly see the last step. On the 7th level, a young man stepped onto it. The terrifying ball of lightning carried the mighty heavenly might, and at the same time, it fell down. The ball of lightning carried the heavenly might and was mighty. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Under the endless pressure, the void seemed to be about to collapse. "If you want to stop me, then I'll just break it," Su-Yi roared. A domineering and majestic aura suddenly swept out. The last of the primordial chi in his dantian exploded and gathered on his right fist. Blue veins began to appear on his face, making him look even more ferocious. Boom! At the same time, Su-Yi shook his arm and punched the falling ball of lightning with his right fist. A terrible power erupted like a volcano. Su-Yi's fist shone brightly, as if it was expanding. There was a clear sound of wind and thunder, like the sound of thunder, rumbling. At this moment, Su-Yi's body was like an overlord awakening. The huge pressure of an emperor also rose to the extreme. Everyone who could see was dumbfounded. At this moment, the young man did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. He actually wanted to resist the heavenly might. How fierce! In an instant, the fist collided with a ball of lightning. Chapter 409. The entire secret tower of heaven shook violently as if it was about to collapse. Lightning raged, drowning everything. The dazzling lightning spread over the secret tower of heaven, covering the entire secret tower of heaven. It's too shocking. Can Su-Yi withstand it? Some disciples were shocked. Under such mighty heavenly power, they felt their hair stand on end. If he can't withstand it, our Shunjian Gate will lose a genius. If he can withstand it, Su-Yi will be the first person in our Shunjian Gate in thousands of years. In the distance, the experts of the Divine Sword sect were also dazzled by the sight of the violent lightning. Their hearts were palpitating in fear. Above the surrounding void, there were powerful and obscure auras fluctuating. The entire secret tower of heaven continued to shake and rumble. Everyone was shocked. Their eyes widened. They were shocked beyond belief. Can he withstand it? Su Jiahui and Zhang Qing held their breaths. They did not dare to breathe too loudly. Their fists were clenched so tightly that their nails dug into their palms. They were completely unaware of it. It was enough to show how nervous they were. The exchange of blows did not last very long. However, at this moment, everyone felt that it had lasted for an incomparably long period of time. The tense and terrifying atmosphere made it difficult for people to breathe. Their vitality froze. The scene seemed to be frozen in front of their eyes. Everything finally dissipated a little. The dazzling lightning gradually disappeared. Everything disappeared. Even the wind and clouds were surging around. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Sunlight began to penetrate, brightening the vision. The thunderclouds faded, as if they had never appeared. Some people held their breaths in anticipation and nervousness. Everything around them seemed to have frozen, falling into a state of stillness. When everything became clear, on the top of the secret tower of heaven, on the 7th floor, the young man had already set his feet on the 7th floor. The young man's black hair was scattered. He held a sword in his left hand. His body was covered in light, and there was a fierce pressure that did not dissipate. It was as if he was looking down on the world. The red light in his eyes was terrifying. At this moment, only then did Su-yi realize how difficult it was just now. He had to support the broken sword to stand up, and his injuries were too severe. But Su-yi was overjoyed. He had relied on his own strength to reach the heaven-reaching platform. He hadn't relied on the power of the mysterious space. Boom! The heavens and earth rumbled. Above the heaven ascension platform, a golden light shone down from the boundless skies. The dazzling golden light descended and enveloped Su-yi's body. When this light enveloped Su-yi, it was as if there was a surge of endless power pouring into his body. Visible to the naked eye, Su-yi was shrouded in a golden light. Heaven and earth energy rippled around him, and a hazy mist appeared. His aura continued to recover and even rose. Soon, the visible wounds on Su-yi's body were healed in an instant. His face was rosy again, and the chi in his body was boiling again. Golden light flickered. Su-yi's divine might was awe-inspiring as he stood on the heaven's ascension platform. Divine rings surrounded him as the young war god looked down on the world. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock. This is on the towering mountain peak. Situ Yuyun's figure also rose into the air. She stared at the heaven ascension platform in a daze. I understand. Su-yi has succeeded. He has reached the 7th level of the heaven ascension platform with his own combat strength. This is the reward given by the heaven ascension platform. In the surrounding void, the voices of the Shunjian Gates experts were trembling. That young man had reached the top of the heaven ascension platform with his own combat strength. He had succeeded. He had successfully set foot on the heaven ascension platform. The degree of his success was probably even greater than that of a heaven-grade talent. Is this true? Su-yi has successfully reached the top. Many people were shocked and in disbelief. Su-yi had really reached the top. That was comparable to the legendary heaven-grade talent. They had witnessed the birth of a legend with their own eyes. A person with mediocre talent had relied on himself to reach the top of the heaven ascension platform. This was too terrifying. Our Shunjian Gate is going to prosper. On the towering mountain peak, the right guardian's pupils constricted. His heart was incomparably shocked. Reaching the sky in a single step. This boy is extraordinary. Shunjian Gate will prosper. Situ Lioyun's aura fluctuated. It was incomparably powerful. Her eyes seemed to contain a sea of fire. At this moment, ripples were fluctuating in shock. I knew it. You can do it. Su Jiehui raised her eyes. Her dress was fluttering. The uniform of the female disciples of Shunjian Gate could not hide her outstanding aura. Her two small dimples were charming. Her eyes were clear and beautiful. This is too amazing. Su-yi will be the #1 person of Shunjian Gate from now on. There was an uproar. Su-yi was too terrifying. It was said that a heaven-grade talent was incomparably terrifying. They were powerful and ferocious enough to sweep away everything. And now, Su-yi proved that he was not below the legendary heaven-grade talent. Boom! On the secret tower of heaven, it seemed slow, but in fact it was very fast. The aura of Su-yi rose to the peak. In the dazzling golden light, the aura of his body was like a flying dragon soaring to the sky. In a spurt of energy, it directly rose to a new level. He's actually breaking through? Everyone was dumbfounded. At this moment, the warlike youth was already terrifying enough. But now, he was actually breaking through directly in front of them. He has reached the secret tower of heaven. This is the reward given by the secret tower of heaven. In the void far away, a strong figure spoke. The secret tower of heaven was set up by the ancestors of Shunjian Gate. It communicates with the heavens and earth. Su-yi has reached the secret tower of heaven without being destroyed. He will also receive a reward. Breaking through directly is just a drop in the ocean. The most important thing is that he will be tempered by the energy of the heavens and earth. This is the greatest benefit. An old figure spoke. The secret tower of heaven was connected to the heavens and earth. The benefits that Su-yi was receiving at this moment came from the heavens and earth. At this moment, Su-yi's eyes were closed. He stood quietly and was enveloped by the golden light. At this moment, no one noticed that a thin layer of skin had fallen off Su-yi's body under the golden light. This was the result of Su-yi's physical body being torn apart when he was climbing up the stairs. After the old skin fell off, Su-yi's body was revealed. It was as clear as jade and looked even more powerful. At this moment, the golden light on the secret tower of heaven came from the heavens and earth. It seemed to have the effect of isolating everything. No one could see the most subtle changes on Su-yi's body. This was a new kind of transformation. Only Su-yi knew that the energy that was pouring into his body at this moment was from the heavens and earth. It was washing his bones and cleansing his marrows. It made his diamond body more perfect and flawless. Girl's hair. If there was an expert who saw everything on Su-yi's body at this moment, he would definitely be stunned. This kind of physical body was too terrifying. It was comparable to the young of the demon race's large beasts, and it was not inferior in any way. Chapter 410. For a human body, and a young one at that, to be able to reach such a perfect and powerful state, if this were to spread out, it would definitely scare people to death. Such a young man was terrifying from the inside out. If the outside world were to learn of this, it would probably cause a storm and shake the world. Su-yi could also feel that the worldly energy was cleansing his bones and cleansing his marrow and also tempering his soul. The effects would not be inferior to that of his physical body. All along, Su-yi knew that he did not need to fear anyone at the same level as him, and that he could fight anyone at the same level, even demon race youngsters. However, Su-yi would not be satisfied with this. He wanted to become a powerful expert, to protect everything around him, and one day he would step onto the sacred mountain to seek justice for himself. He definitely did not want to just defeat cultivators at the same level as him. Only by perfecting everything and strengthening his foundation could he go further. Some time ago, Su-yi's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, growing too quickly, causing some imperceptible flaws to appear in his foundation. Although these flaws were invisible to the naked eye and could be ignored, Su-yi could still feel that these flaws still existed and would perhaps appear one day. Now, under the impact of the worldly energy, Su-yi could clearly feel that the flaws from before had been erased, and everything in his body was becoming more and more perfect. However, Su-yi was not satisfied. He knew that only by being stricter on himself could he become stronger in the future. Enveloped by the golden light, Su-yi's body released a radiance that grew increasingly crystalline, and his aura grew stronger. At a certain moment, the golden light finally disappeared, and the worldly energy in the surroundings also began to dissipate. Su-yi opened his eyes, which shone with a dazzling light. He could feel that he had reached the 4th level of the origin spirit realm, and his aura was surging, his soul was abundant, and his yuan qi was surging. Why are there so many people Su-yi saw the densely packed Shunjian Gate experts that appeared in the distant void and felt the many powerful auras that were hidden in the void. He frowned slightly and revealed a bitter smile. It seemed that ascending to the 7th level had attracted too much attention. This was not what Su-yi wanted. He did not want to attract too much attention. Su-yi ascended to the 7th level of the sky, reaching platform purely to test himself. As for the benefits he obtained in the end, Su-yi was surprised. These benefits were astonishing, a type of opportunity. However, Su-yi didn't want to attract too much attention. The Xinjiang Gate and the Sacred Mountain were both in the central province. Given the size of the Sacred Mountain, there should be many spies in the Xinjiang Gate. If something were to spread to the Sacred Mountain, it would be very disadvantageous for him before he grew up. While thinking, Su-yi's eyes suddenly lit up. This was the Heaven Ascension platform, which was used to test one's talent and battle prowess. It wasn't like the Yuan testing stone he had seen before, but it was probably related to the Yuan testing stone. Su-yi knew the function of the mysterious space. Once he came into contact with the Yuan testing stone, even he had no way to control it, just like in the barbarian city. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile. Su-yi put the broken heavy sword in his hand back on his back. At the same time, he squatted down slightly, stretched out his palm, and lightly touched the Heaven Ascension platform. Hey, what is Su-yi doing? Looking at Su-yi's action, everyone was surprised and puzzled. On the Heaven Ascension platform, Su-yi secretly took a deep breath. His palm was placed on the Heaven Ascension platform, and a stream of Yuan chi slowly gushed out. Boom! Suddenly, the Heaven Ascension platform trembled. Su-yi suddenly felt that there was a strong energy fluctuation in the Heaven Ascension platform. Rumble. At the same time, the mysterious light in Su-yi's mind seemed to be suddenly attracted by something, and suddenly moved. Walala. A light was released from Su-yi's mind, and a strange force swept out like lightning. Su-yi could clearly feel that the mysterious light in his mind was spreading out a strange force, and through his palm, it swept directly into the Heaven Ascension platform. At this moment, Su-yi seemed to feel that his palm was forming a devouring force. And finally, like silk being peeled from a cocoon, it absorbed the energy from the Heaven Ascension platform. Rumble! Suddenly, the Heaven Ascension platform, which had just calmed down, rumbled and shook. From the inside of the Heaven Ascension platform, there was a bright light and a trembling sound, revealing the 4 colors of black, green, red, and white. What's going on? Such a change was unprecedented, and it made everyone's expression change greatly. What's going on now? In the void, the expert from Shunjiang Gate were also surprised. Kaka, the light was so bright that it seemed like the earth was shaking. The entire Heaven Ascension platform, from top to bottom, was filled with cracks like a spider web and quickly covered the entire Heaven Ascension platform. Hey, the pressure seems to have decreased a lot. It's so strange. The pressure suddenly decreased a lot. The disciples of Shunjiang Gate who were on the Heaven Ascension platform were surprised, and they could all feel that the invisible pressure that had been shrouding them had decreased a lot. Kaka! On the Heaven Ascension platform, dense cracks appeared from under Su-yi's palm. In a dozen breaths, everything had completely disappeared and calmed down. The light on the Heaven Ascension platform also dimmed. Did I succeed? Su-yi stood up, smiling, and felt that the Heaven Ascension platform should have contained a lot of primordial stones. As Su-yi expected, the Heaven Ascension platform's talent test should be related to the primordial stones. From what Su-yi felt just now, the primordial stones in the Heaven Ascension platform were definitely a huge number. Su-yi did not know how much benefit he had gained in the mysterious space, and he would only know if he entered the mysterious space himself. Hurry up! The pressure has decreased a lot. Go up, step onto the 4th level, and we can enter the battlefield of 1,000 swords. Hurry up, hurry up! We must enter the battlefield of 1,000 swords. Soon, the disciples on the Heaven Ascension platform understood and rushed up the Heaven Ascension platform, while the pressure was greatly reduced. All the disciples hoped to reach the 4th level and enter the battlefield of 1,000 swords. The Heaven Ascension platform was filled with cracks, and there was no more light. However, the two space portals on the 4th and 5th levels were still there, and they were filled with light, shining brightly. As for the 6th and 7th levels, there were no space portals at all. It seemed that the experts of Shunjian Gate did not expect that a terrifying guy would reach the 7th level in the Outer Gates talent test. In the past years, the number of Outer Gates disciples who could reach the 5th level could be counted with one's fingers, and it was hard to find one in 100 years, let alone the 6th level. As for the 7th level, it only existed in legends under normal circumstances. Walala, hurry up. AE most K% new chapter H. Section EQ on T Cooled Smith. Net dollar. Chapter 411. What's going on? There seems to be an accident at the secret Tower of Heaven. The pressure on the secret Tower of Heaven seems to have decreased. In the distance, the expert from Shunjian Gate also noticed the abnormality. The pressure on the secret Tower of Heaven had decreased greatly, and all the disciples could reach the 4th level now. Just a few more steps. I did it. Dad, Mom, I'm going to succeed. The disciples around the secret Tower of Heaven cried emotionally. They had worked hard for 5 years just for this day. They thought that their chances were slim, but they did not expect that they would succeed and reach the 4th level, allowing them to enter the battlefield of 10,000 swords. One by one, the disciples reached the 4th level and entered the portal, heading to the battlefield of 10,000 swords. There were also disciples who continued to climb the stairs, wanting to reach the 5th level. The pressure on the secret Tower of Heaven had decreased greatly, but it was not completely gone. It was just that the pressure was less than 10 or 20% of the usual pressure. Therefore, many disciples felt that they had a chance to reach the 5th level. There seems to be an accident at the secret Tower of Heaven. What's going on? Why would there be an accident at the secret Tower of Heaven? The experts from Shunjian Gate and the attendants below the secret Tower of Heaven were all stunned. They had never heard of an accident at the secret Tower of Heaven. The battlefield of 10,000 swords was an isolated area. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least a month for an Origin Spirit Realm disciple to walk out of it. The vastness of the battlefield of 10,000 swords was beyond imagination, and there were many dangers and crises that could happen at any time. It was a training ground used by Shunjian Gate to train their disciples. According to the data from the past years, it would be amazing if there were more than 100 inner disciples who could walk out of the battlefield of 10,000 swords successfully. The battlefield of 10,000 swords was almost the same as the outside world. There were also suns, moons, and stars, but it was an isolated area. The experts of Shunjian Gate had long ago taken control of it, and everything was arranged and selected to train the younger disciples. There were many savage beasts in the battlefield of 10,000 swords, but their cultivation levels were not too high. They were fatal to the inner disciples, but they were not powerless to fight back. In short, the battlefield of 10,000 swords was a place of true forging and tempering. There would be true bloodshed and even life-threatening danger. The competition was cruel, but no one would say anything. This was a world where the strong were respected. Everything depended on strength. It was the same in Shunjian Gate. Somewhere in the battlefield of 10,000 swords, there was a spatial teleportation gate. Two old men in their 50s with extraordinary auras stood in front of the portal. They had the badge of the Shunjian Gate Protector on them. Behind the two protectors stood the disciples of Shunjian Gate. All of them looked to be in their 30s, and their auras were quite extraordinary. They were waiting here for the outer court disciples who were able to enter the myriad sword battlefield, so that they could find out how talented these outer court disciples were. To some extent, the Shunjian Gate didn't want to miss out on any disciple. I wonder how many people will be able to enter this time. I remember 5 years ago, a total of 121 people entered. That's already a lot. Among the two protectors, the old man with a round waist on the left spoke. He was slightly plump, and his belly was slightly bulging. However, his eyes were filled with a sharp light that couldn't be underestimated. It's about time. No one has entered yet. Are these outer court disciples so useless this time? the tall and thin protector on the right said. According to the time of the previous Myriad Sword conferences, it was already late in the morning. Someone should have already come out of the spatial teleportation gate. 1 year is slightly better, the next year is worse. This is normal. After all, they're outer court disciples. It's impossible for them to be outstanding. The fat protector sighed. The chubby protector sighed. He could understand. The Divine Sword sect did not want to miss out on any talented disciples. However, they did not have much hope for these outer sect disciples. After all, these disciples were already failures when it didn't become inner court disciples back then. Cool K dollar craftsman caret net underscore only percent one genuine square root J, and all of them are robbers V version P. Fortunately, among the young disciples this time, there are such monstrous fellows like Ryugan River, Yun Lingfeng, and Gong Chi. It's the fortune of our Shunjian Gate. The tall and thin disciple smiled. 5 years ago, when Ryugan River, Yun Lingfeng, and Gong Chi entered the Shunjian Gate, it shocked the entire Shunjian Gate. In order to hide the strength and talent of these fellows, the gate deliberately let these fellows appear less in front of the outside world. How many years has it been since our Shunjian Gate produced such a group of extraordinary fellows? The gate has high hopes for them. The fat protector's eyes wavered. As a protector, he knew very well how much resources the Shunjian Gate had invested in Yun Lingfeng, Ryugan River, and the others in the past 5 years. It could be said that they had high hopes for them. I wonder how Ho Changming is doing over there, the tall and skinny protector said with a grin on his face. Haha, looking at the situation, it's unlikely that anyone will enter from the 5th level. The fat protector smiled. He knew what he meant. In the past 100 years, the number of disciples who could walk out from the 5th level of the Myriad Sword Conference could be counted on one hand. Strictly speaking, the number of disciples who could walk out from the 5th level of the Myriad Sword Conference could be counted on one hand. In 4 or 5 Myriad Sword Conferences, there would only be one outer court disciple who showed extraordinary talent and was able to reach the 5th level of the heavenly platform. In the Myriad Sword Conference 5 years ago, there was only one extraordinary disciple who reached the 5th level of the heavenly platform. Therefore, this time, it was unlikely that any disciple would reach the 5th level of the heavenly platform. The reason why the protectors were in the Myriad Sword battlefield and waited outside the spatial portal was because they had the opportunity to pick some disciples they liked to take in. As a protector of the Shunjian Gate, they could also take in disciples. However, every time a new disciple of the Shunjian Gate entered the sect, the talented ones would naturally be remembered by the elders of the various peaks. It was not their turn to be a protector. Therefore, the protectors could only wait in the Myriad Sword Conference and see if they could pick up any leftovers from the re-examination of the outer court disciples. The elders were usually too embarrassed to compete with them, nor did they have the intention to compete. This was because the re-examination of the disciples were all disciples that the elders did not take a fancy to 5 years ago. Protector Ho Changming was the protector who had lost in the drawing of lots this time and could only wait at the spatial portal on the other side. That spatial portal was connected to the 5th level of the heavenly platform. Those who could walk out from the spatial portal were all king grade talents. How could a king grade talent be missed out so easily 5 years ago? Chapter 412. So this time, theoretically speaking, it was impossible for any disciple to reach the 5th level. This time, if we could pick a few strong disciples, that would be good enough, said the tall and skinny elder. Although no one had come out yet, there would always be disciples. If they could pick a few strong disciples, that would be good. Every time there was an opportunity like this, it would take many years for the protectors to have a chance. The first one will be mine, the second and the third one will be yours. Then you can choose your own disciples. How about that? The chubby protector's eyes twinkled. The first one to reach the 4th level of the heavenly platform, from a certain perspective, was the most talented one. He wanted to recruit him as a disciple. All right. The tall and skinny elder hesitated for a moment before nodding. Although the first disciple to walk out was guaranteed to be talented, there might still be accidents. There were 2 disciples who walked out in the 2nd and 3rd place, so they wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Poor Ho Changming. I'm afraid he's going to sit on the bench. The chubby elder smiled mischievously. He still remembered that when Ho Changming had drawn lots to guard the portal to the 5th floor of the heavenly platform, his face had turned black, but he had pretended to be proud and aloof. He had said that it was better to have no disciple than to have a shoddy one, and that he absolutely couldn't accept one, said the tall and skinny elder with a smile. Ho Changming would not be able to get any disciples this time. Next time, there would be so many protectors in the Shunjian Gate. Who knew how many years it would take? Hey, finally someone is coming. Suddenly, the tall and skinny protector raised his head and looked at the teleportation portal. There was finally a fluctuation in the teleportation portal. He wanted to know who would be the first one to come out of the teleportation portal. Many pairs of eyes immediately fell on the space transportation portal. The chubby elder was looking forward to it. The first disciple to come out of the teleportation portal was the one he would most likely accept as his disciple. Under everyone's gazes, the spatial portal fluctuated, and then a figure flashed out. It was a young man who was about 20 years old. When he came out of the teleportation portal, he looked happy and excited. "Looks like he barely made it," said the chubby protector. He did not have much hope for the disciples who came out of the teleportation portal this time, so he was quite satisfied. Swish! Just as the chubby protector was about to say something, there was another fluctuation in the teleportation portal, and another person came out. The tall and skinny elder paid special attention to the second and third person. They were most likely the ones he would accept as his disciple. Under everyone's gazes, the second and third person came out of the teleportation portal. But then the fourth, fifth, and sixth person came out. This was not the end. More and more figures continued to walk out. Soon, hundreds of people had walked out. Seeing so many people, the two protectors immediately saw hope. This batch of young disciples had worked hard in the past 5 years. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to produce so many disciples. Succeeded. One by one, the disciples came out and looked around. They could not hide their excitement and happiness. They had finally entered the battlefield of 10,000 swords and had a chance to become an inner disciple. That's not right. Why are there still disciples coming out? The tall and skinny protector and the chubby protector were very happy, but then they became suspicious. Hundreds of disciples had already come out, but there were still more coming out of the teleportation portal. It seemed like they had no intention of stopping. 359, 360. When the tall and skinny protector saw that 360 disciples had come out, the expression on his face froze, and he frowned. Was he seeing a ghost? Could it be that all the outer sect disciples were so outstanding this time? Somewhere in the battlefield of 10,000 swords, a figure stood in front of the teleportation portal. It was an old man who looked to be in his 50s. He was not tall, but his face gave people a feeling that he had been through a lot. But the old man's eyes were shining with a faint light, which made people tremble when they looked at him. The old man was Ho Changming, the protector who had drawn the lot to come here. Behind Protector Ho Changming, there were a few disciples who looked to be in their 30s. They stood there lazily, as if they could not muster up any energy. They all knew that guarding the teleportation portal was just for show. It was unlikely that any disciple would be able to come out. This was the teleportation portal that connected to the 5th level of the heavens platform. Among this batch of outer disciples, who would have such talent? If one of them comes out, then I'll have profited. Ho Changming pouted and muttered to himself. He did not want to come to this teleportation portal, but his luck was too bad. Therefore, at this moment, Ho Changming could only think in his heart that if there was a miracle this time and a disciple walked out of the portal and was accepted by him, those guys would regret it until their intestines turned green. First V0, asterisk, 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 Ho Changming sighed. He knew in his heart that there were not many disciples who could reach the 5th level of the heavens platform. 5 years ago, there had already been one, so this time it was unlikely. He could only blame himself for being unlucky. There's someone. Suddenly, Ho Changming's eyes trembled. His eyes lit up as he stared at the portal. Ho Changming could clearly feel that there was movement in the teleportation portal. Someone was coming out of the teleportation portal. Is there really a miracle? At that moment, Ho Changming was extremely excited. If a disciple really came out of the teleportation portal and was accepted into the sect, then he would have made a fortune. Ho Changming was very excited. He was looking forward to it. The few disciples who had been listless before suddenly became excited. They wanted to see who had managed to reach the 5th level of the Heavens platform. Being able to reach the 5th level of the Heavens platform meant that he was extremely talented. He was a king-level cultivator. He was destined to become a direct disciple. Under the gazes of many people, a person came out of the teleportation portal. It was a young man who was about 20 years old. He glanced around and was extremely excited. Ho Changming was about to say something when the teleportation portal shook again. Immediately after, 2 more young men came out. They were so excited and happy that they almost cried tears of joy. 3 people. This time it's a blessing from the heavens. Chapter 4:13. At that moment, Ho Changming was so excited that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. He didn't expect that he would be able to wait until a disciple came out of the portal. It wasn't just 1 disciple, it was 3. We did it, we did it. The 3 young men walked out of the portal excitedly. Ho Changming was about to say something when suddenly there was a fluctuation in the portal again and more people came out. It wasn't just 1 person, there were groups of 3 to 5, 8 to 9, 36, 37. When more than 30 outer sect disciples walked out of the portal, Ho Changming's face was already stunned. He felt that something was absolutely wrong. 127, 128. When the number of outer sect disciples came out of the portal had reached 128, Ho Changming was about to collapse. This was definitely not normal. It was impossible for such a thing to happen. Ho Changming couldn't help but suspect that there was a problem with the Tower of Heaven. How could there be a problem with the Tower of Heaven? It was set up by the ancestors of the Xinjiang Gate. He had never heard of a problem with the Tower of Heaven. However, everything in front of him told him that this was definitely not normal. When the number of people in the portal reached thousands, Protector Ho Changming completely collapsed. They were densely packed and crowded at the exit. What's going on? Why are there so many people on the 5th level of the Tower of Heaven? Ho Changming couldn't help but ask a disciple. Something big must have happened. Greetings, Protector. I don't know. Many people have reached the 5th level. There are even people who have reached the 7th level, said the disciple who was still immersed in excitement. This outer sect disciple had never thought that he would be able to reach the 5th level of the Tower of Heaven. If this was spread back to his hometown, it would be enough to bring glory to his ancestors. The 7th level. Ho Changming was dumbfounded. This was absolutely impossible. How could an outer sect disciple have such talent? What a joke. All disciples enter the battlefield of 10,000 swords. You are on your own. Ho Changming immediately opened his mouth. His voice was laced with vitality as it reverberated through the air. The entrance of the portal could no longer accommodate so many people. Inside the teleportation gate, 1 figure after another walked out with excitement and joy. When the number of people was estimated to be 7 or 8,000, Ho Changming was completely unable to calm down. He couldn't wait to walk over and see what was happening on the Tower of Heaven. With so many disciples walking out, Protector Ho Changming sized them up, but he didn't find anyone special at all. Their talent and cultivation were just ordinary. Something must have happened to the Heaven Ascension platform. Protector Ho Changming didn't know how to deal with such a group of outer sect disciples. To wait, he couldn't accept a few disciples. A few of the older disciples of the Divine Sword sect were also stunned. They had no idea what was going on. Why were there so many people walking out of the space portal? Was this going against the heavens? No matter how they looked at it, these disciples didn't seem to have king-grade talent. The group of disciples was indescribably excited. They were guided into the battlefield of 10,000 swords. Ho Changming was standing on the side in a daze. Some disciples walked out of the portal and bowed to him. He could only nod his head mechanically. He was still immersed in shock and couldn't come back to his senses. 3 more people walked out of the portal. 2 men and 1 woman. The woman wasn't very old. She was about 15 or 16 years old. Her face was sparkling and her skin was as white as snow. She had 2 small dimples on her cheeks. One of them was a young man wearing a gray robe and cotton boots. His black hair reached his shoulders, and he had a broken sword on his back. There was also an older young man. He wasn't very tall, and he had a sturdy body. Metal chi was fluctuating around his body, and he had a sharp chi. Protector Ho Changming was still staring at the portal. After the three of them walked out, it seemed that no one else followed them out. "Is this the battlefield of 10,000 swords?" said Zhang Qing while looking around. He was extremely excited. He had never thought that he would be able to reach the 5th level of the Tower of Heaven. It was simply a miracle. "It should be. We're all in." Su Jiahui smiled. There was a smile on her pale face. He looked at the scene in front of him, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. There were no portals on the 7th and 6th levels. He could only walk down to the 5th level. He happened to see Su Jiahui and Zhang Qing. They entered the portal together. As for the other outer disciples of the 36 Sword Peak, they had probably entered the battlefield of 10,000 swords from the 4th level. He was the instigator of what had happened on the secret Tower of Heaven, so he naturally knew why so many disciples had climbed up the secret Tower of Heaven. In that case, the commotion caused by him reaching the 7th level would be covered up. Anyway, the Tower of Heaven had lost its function. There wouldn't be so many people paying attention to him. Thinking of this, he was very satisfied with his performance. He felt like he was going to leave in a huff. "Greetings, Protector." Su Jiahui and Zhang Qing saw Protector Ho Changming and immediately bowed. "Is there no one behind?" Protector Ho Changming asked. He stuck his head out and looked into the portal. It seemed that no one had come out. "Protector, there should be no one left. We're the last few," Zhang Qing replied. He was a little nervous. When he first came in, Yi and Su Jiahui were waiting for him. They were also the last ones. Finally, "There's no one left." Protector Ho Changming frowned. Suddenly, his eyes fell on Yi. He looked at Yi and felt that this young man seemed to have a special temperament. It was a pity that Protector Ho Changming had never seen Yi before. "Young man, I want to accept you as my disciple. Are you willing to be my disciple?" Protector Ho Changming pretended to be serious and looked at Yi. He felt that this young man was young, but he had an extraordinary temperament. Maybe he was the person he was looking for. After waiting outside the portal for so long, he couldn't not accept a disciple. "Thank you, Protector. I already have a master." Yi smiled. He had no intention to be Protector Ho Changming's disciple. Protector Ho Changming's face twitched when he saw that an outer disciple had rejected him so straightforwardly. He was embarrassed in front of the disciples behind him. "Disciple, are you willing to be my disciple?" Chapter 414. "Thank you, Protector, but I don't intend to be your disciple." Su Jiahui bowed politely, but her rejection was direct and straightforward. She had no intention of negotiating. Protector Ho Changming was stunned, and the corner of his eyes twitched. He was the protector of Shenzhen Gate. If he wanted to accept an outer sect disciple as his disciple, it would be the dream of all the outer sect disciples in Shenzhen Gate. Being accepted as a disciple by a protector, although the status was not as high as that of an elder's disciple, it was far above that of an inner sect disciple. But today he was directly rejected by 2 disciples, which made Protector Ho Changming feel very depressed. "Boy, are you willing to be my disciple?" Protector Ho Changming's expression was a little ugly, and he stared at Zhang Qing. He did not believe that he could not accept a disciple. After guarding the space portal for so long, he had to accept a disciple. Disciple Zhang Qing pays his respects to Master. Zhang Qing was stunned, but then he directly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. The speed was so fast that Protector Ho Changming did not come back to his senses. "Okay, get up. From now on, you are my disciple. Perform well in the battlefield of 10,000 swords." Protector Ho Changming secretly took a deep breath and adjusted his attitude. At least he had accepted a disciple. Zhang Qing stood up, very excited. To be accepted as a disciple by an elder was already a good thing that he had dreamed of. Protector Ho Changming looked at Zhang Qing. This new disciple was a little ugly, and from the aura on his body, he was not outstanding. It seemed that he was not even at the average level of this batch of outer sect disciples. He could not help but feel a little regret. He just wanted to accept the disciple purely because he was provoked. He wanted to know if he would be rejected by a third outer sect disciple, who knew that this disciple would kneel down and kowtow in an instant. This disciple had kowtowed, and he also spoke. Now that things had come to this, even if he was secretly dissatisfied, there was nothing he could do. Congratulations, Zhang Qing. Su Jiahui was happy for Zhang Qing. It was a great fortune for her to be accepted as a disciple by the protector. Zhang Qing smiled and felt that he was lucky recently. He had reached the 5th level of the Tower of Heaven and had become a protector's disciple. Normally, he wouldn't have dared to think about such things. Zhang Qing, you can only rely on yourself for the dangers in the myriad sword arena. Train well. There was no way to regret it. Words spoken were like water spilled. Protector Ho Chaming had no choice but to accept it. He instructed the disciple he had just casually accepted. Sensing this disciple's strength, Protector Ho Chaming estimated that this disciple would not be able to protect himself in the myriad sword battlefield. It would already be good if he could make it out alive. Protector Ho Chaming hoped that this disciple would be able to make it out alive. As soon as he finished speaking, a jade bottle appeared in Ho Chaming's hand. He handed it to Zhang Qing and continued, "Take this pill in case you need it." "Thank you, master." Zhang Qing was touched and took the jade bottle. There seemed to be a lot of pills inside. Having a protector as a master was indeed different. She was glad that she had found a good master. Go. There are dangers in the myriad sword battlefield, but there are also opportunities. Everything depends on your luck. As for the sword pattern stone, let's leave it to fate. Protector Ho Chaming instructed Zhang Qing. After all, she was his disciple. There were dangers in the myriad sword battlefield, but there were also opportunities and opportunities. When it came to the sword pattern stone, Protector Ho Chaming immediately felt that he was overthinking. There were only a few sword pattern stones. To be able to obtain a sword pattern stone in the end, how strong must one be? With the strength of his new disciple, Protector Ho Chaming felt that he was overthinking. Disciple will remember. Zhang Qing was very excited and was still immersed in joy. Then, Su Jiahui, and Zhang Qing left and entered the myriad sword battlefield. "It seems that I have to find the sword pattern stone," Su Yi muttered. They had already entered the myriad sword battlefield, but according to the rules of the myriad sword battlefield, the sword pattern stone was very important. The experts of the Shunjin Gate did not put in many sword pattern stones in the entire myriad sword battlefield. Only the 68 disciples with the most sword pattern stones could go to the Lingjian Peak for the final showdown. Therefore, the more sword pattern stones there were, the greater the chances. Because of this, the direct disciples would only enter the myriad sword battlefield half a month later. With the strength of the direct disciples, if they entered at the same time, the chances of the inner and outer disciples finding the sword pattern stones would be 0. Su Yi did not have to get those sword pattern stones. It was just that in the final showdown, the 16 people with the highest ranking would be able to obtain supreme benefits and a large amount of rewards from the Xinjiang Gate. This was what Su Yi was concerned about. Since he was already at the Xinjiang Gate, he naturally could not miss out on the supreme benefits and large amounts of rewards. There must be a problem. There must be a problem. Hashtag our most Inu E Chapter 10 Section Z Upper E/N. The Myriad Sword Battlefield. Outside the portal, the thin and tall Guardian and the chubby Guardian were completely stunned. A total of over 10,000 outer sect disciples walked out of the portal, which left the two protectors dumbfounded, simply dumbfounded. In the past, it was already good if there were more than 100 people walking out, but this time there were more than 10,000 people. More than half of the outer disciples had reached the 4th level of the heaven-reaching platform. What kind of concept was this? Could it be that all the outer disciples this time were so awesome? What the two guardians did not know was that around the heaven-reaching platform, a group of experts from the Shunjian Gate were even more stunned. Figures approached the heaven-reaching platform one by one, and the experts descended to check the heaven-reaching platform. There's a big problem. The heaven-reaching platform has lost its function. An expert said he had found the problem. The heaven-reaching platform had lost its function, so basically all the outer disciples had entered. Repair it immediately. A bunch of experts from Shenzhen Gate were discussing the importance of the heavenly platform to Shenzhen Gate. Moreover, it wouldn't be long before the Shenzhen Gate's new disciple recruitment, which was held once every 5 years, would begin again. What's going on? Why is there a problem with the heavenly platform? This is too strange. Was the secret passage caused by Su-yi? I think there's something wrong with the sky-reaching platform. That's why Su-yi was able to reach the 7th floor. Otherwise, how could he have reached the 7th floor? It's unbelievable. Some experts were discussing. This matter had shaken the entire Shenzhen Gate. Inside the myriad sword battlefield, everything was not much different from the outside world. The mountains were connected together, deep and gloomy, and the ancient trees towered into the sky. Creak, creak, Su-yi, Su-jiahui, and Zhongqing slowly walked forward, knowing the general direction. It would take them nearly a month to cross the myriad sword battlefield. I did it. If my father and mother knew, they would be very happy. Chapter 415. Congrats. Su-yi was also happy for Zhongqing. He could tell that although Ho Changming was a little conflicted, he was also very honest with Zhongqing. He was much better than Wang Chuanda of the Sacred Mountain. Su-yi reckoned that in the future, Zhongqing would definitely have a good future under Ho Changming's tutelage. To other outer sect disciples, this was something that they could only dream of. Let's not be happy too early. The myriad sword battlefield is not an ordinary place. My master is right. There are opportunities and fortune in the myriad sword battlefield, but there are also absolute dangers. I've received news that even direct disciples might die in every myriad sword conference. Zhongqing's expression turned serious. Although he was happy, he was also worried and nervous. In every myriad sword conference, there would always be direct disciples who would perish. With his strength, it would not be easy for him to walk out of the myriad sword battlefield. There seems to be a lot of danger in there. There are also powerful savage beasts. Su Jiahui's expression was also rather solemn. She knew that with her and Zhongqing's strength, it would be a little difficult for them to walk out of the myriad sword battlefield. Don't worry, I'm still here. I'll bring you guys out. Su-yi smiled. The myriad sword battlefield had been set up by the ancestors of the Shenzhen Gate. The dangers inside shouldn't be too great. Su-yi had also stayed in the Savage Demon Forest and the Savage Demon Forest. No matter how dangerous the myriad sword battlefield was, it couldn't be more dangerous than the Savage Demon Forest and the Savage Demon Forest. Of course, Su-yi wasn't careless. The Shenzhen Gate was a great sect that had stood tall in the central region for a long time. Naturally, there was a reason for it. In terms of training disciples, it definitely had its own unique points. That's right. With Brother Su-yi's strength, it shouldn't be a problem for you to walk out of the myriad sword battlefield. Even if you collect enough sword pattern stones, there's still hope. Zhongqing suddenly felt more confident. Su-yi was here. He was a terrifying guy who had reached the 7th level of the sky-reaching platform and defeated the 15th sword of the Sword Pagoda. Zhongqing reckoned that Su-yi would have no problem walking out of the myriad sword battlefield. There was definitely hope for him to collect enough sword pattern stones. Where are the sword pattern stones usually located? At the mention of the sword pattern stone, Su-yi really wanted to know more about it. The sword pattern stone was very important in the Myriad Sword Conference. It said that the sword vein stone is usually placed in dangerous places or the lairs of ferocious beasts by the sex experts, Su Jiahui said. Savage demon beasts. Hearing this, Su-yi's gaze turned slightly and a smile appeared in his eyes. Brother Su-yi, what are you smiling about? Looking at Su-yi's sudden laughter, Zhongqing was confused. The sword pattern stone was placed in a dangerous place and in the nest of a ferocious beast. What was there to be happy about? Haha, nothing. Su-yi smiled and shook his head. He smiled at Zhongqing and Su Jiahui and said, "Trust me, this time we'll all be able to get the sword pattern stones." Ha! Su-yi couldn't help but laugh out loud. Brute demon beasts. No matter how strong the brute demon beasts were, they wouldn't be that strong. Su Yi had the Origin Supreme technique, which should be enough to suppress the brute demon beasts in the myriad sword battlefield. This, looking at Su Yi's confident smile, Zhang Qing and Su Jiahui could only be stunned. But Su Jiahui and Zhang Qing really believed in Su Yi. After all, they knew best how abnormal this guy in front of them was. He definitely had the opportunity to enter the Lingjian Peak and fight with the top direct disciples. See Chapter 5 Original Chapter, see Chapter K on P8 Unspecified Currency 9 Tianjian Peak, Xinjiang Gate's Majestic Hall. At this moment, there were nearly 100 figures standing, and dozens of figures were sitting on the chairs on both sides. These were the elders and experts of the Divine Sword sect. Their formless auras caused the atmosphere in the hall to solidify. At this moment, ordinary disciples would not dare to come in at all. They would be suppressed by the invisible aura and unable to breathe. Is it because Su Yi went to the 7th floor of the heavenly platform, which caused the heavenly platform to malfunction and lose most of its function? Or is it because the heavenly platform lost most of its function that Su Yi went to the 7th floor? In the hall, the experts and elders of Xinjiang Gate were discussing. The heavenly platform lost most of its function, which was a matter of great importance. In particular, Su Yi went to the 7th floor of the heavenly platform, which was even more important. I think there should be a problem with the heavenly platform. That guy named Su Yi can go to the 7th floor. His talent is ordinary. Although he has the wind attribute, the other 3 attributes are opposite. His talent is mediocre, and he can only go to the 4th and 5th floor of the heavenly platform by himself. There must be a problem with the heavenly platform. An old man in his 60s said. His expression was indifferent, his figure was medium, and his eyes were shining. Bai Mingshan, don't be so jealous. Isn't it just a few disciples of your 15 Sword Peak who are no match for Su Yi? We have all witnessed Su Yi's combat strength. Sometimes the so-called talent can be unexpected. I feel that Su Yi is not ordinary. Elder Lu Baimei said. He glanced at the elder called by Mingshan from the corner of his eyes and did not show much courtesy. Lu Baimei, what do you mean? Why would I bother with a brat? It's normal for juniors to win or lose. It seems that you're quite confident in your disciple from the 19th Sword Peak. Let's see if your disciple from the 19th Sword Peak or my disciple from the 15th Sword Peak is stronger. Elder Bai Mingshan gave Elder Lu Baimei a stare. I'm not afraid of you. My 19th Sword Peak is not afraid of you. Elder Lu Baimei smiled faintly. He glanced at Elder Bai Mingshan and said, As for the kid you mentioned, if he's really Elder Su's pro-disciple, some people will be jealous of him when they see him in the future. Humph, Elder Su hasn't come back yet. That kid is mysterious. Whether he's really Elder Su's disciple or not has not been confirmed yet. The corner of Elder Bai Mingshan's eyes twitched. He ignored Elder Lu Baimei and looked at Sidu Luyun, who was sitting at the head of the hall, and said, Head, Su Yi's origin is too mysterious. Let's wait for Elder Su to come back before we make a decision. The Myriad Sword battlefield is the foundation of our Xinjiang Gate. That kid is too bold. If he causes any trouble in the Myriad Sword battlefield, it will be too late for regrets. I suggest that we take that kid out of the Myriad Sword battlefield and wait for Elder Su to come back before we make a decision. Chapter 416. Elder Yu Changqing rolled his eyes at Protector Bai Mingshan and said exasperatedly, I think it's because the 15th Sword Peak is afraid of Su Yi. They're afraid that the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak will be suppressed by Su Yi during the Myriad Sword gathering. They won't be able to raise their heads then, so they don't want Su Yi to participate in the Myriad Sword gathering. Yu Changqing, don't measure the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. I'm doing everything for the sake of Xinjiang Gate. The disciples of the 15th Sword Peak can't be suppressed just because they want to. Elder Bai Mingshan said angrily. Elder Bai is right. The Myriad Sword Conference concerns the entire Xinjiang Gate. If Su Yi's background is unknown, then we can't just give him the benefits of Xinjiang Gate, an old man said after some thought. He felt that Elder Bai Mingshan's words made sense. If Su-yi really relied on his own battle prowess to reach the 7th level, then his future will be limitless. But his background is indeed a bit unclear, an old woman said. Her invisible aura was powerful, and her eyes were dazzling. If only Elder Su was here, then everything would be clear, a middle-aged man said. Unfortunately, Elder Su wasn't at Shunjian Gate these days. No one knew when the elusive Elder Su would come back. Su-yi is already a disciple of Shunjian Gate. It's a great fortune for our Shunjian Gate that he reached the 7th level. Perhaps it won't be long before he becomes a peerless talent that can sweep through the world and strengthen our Shunjian Gate. We should nurture such a disciple well. Elder Mei Huaya said with a faint voice. If that's really the case, then it's naturally a good thing. But it's also possible that there's a problem with the heavenly platform. It's too early to make a conclusion. Plus, his identity is indeed a bit unclear, an elder said with a neutral opinion. Elders, Sita Luyin looked at the strong cultivators of the Shunjian Gate and said, when Elder Su comes back, he'll know who Su-yi is. As for whether or not Su-yi has the potential to reach the 7th floor, I think the conference of the 10,000 swords will be the real test. If he's really Elder Su's disciple, and if he excels at the conference of the 10,000 swords, it'll be a blessing for the Shunjian Gate. Sect leader is right. Hearing Situ Liuyun's words, the experts and elders of Shunjian Gate did not say anything. That Su-yi is too daring. I hope he doesn't cause any trouble in the battlefield of the 10,000 swords, Bai Mingshan said hatefully. His indifferent face was filled with displeasure. Elder Bai Mingshan, you're worried that the inner disciples of the 15th Sword Peak will be wiped out by Su-yi, right? Ha! Elder Yu Changqing heard Elder Bai Mingshan's mutterings and laughed loudly. I'd like to see how far that kid can go in the conference of the 10,000 swords. Talent is talent. It's not something that can be replaced by a short period of battle strength. Elder Bai Mingshan said in a deep voice. The group of elders and experts dispersed. Only Sita Luyun and the Right Guardian were left in the hall. Right Guardian, what do you think? Sita Luyun heaved a sigh of relief as she watched the arguing elders and experts leave. She sighed slightly and asked the Right Protector beside her. Sect leader, are you referring to the Heaven Ascension platform? The Right Guardian asked. His eyes were bright and suffused with light. Yes, according to the results of the Elder's inspection, the vitality testing stones in the Heaven Ascension platform have all turned into ashes, causing a problem with the Heaven Ascension platform. Sita Luya nodded. At this moment, he was not completely sure whether the Heaven Ascension platform had malfunctioned because of Su-yi, or if there was a malfunction that caused Su-yi to be able to set foot on the 7th level of the Heaven Ascension platform. Actually, this question is not important. The Right Guardian smiled, as if he had already come to a conclusion. He looked at Sita Luyun and said, from the day Su-yi entered the Shunjian Gate, everything seemed to be rather unusual. But from his performance, it can at least prove that he is indeed extraordinary and unfathomable. That's right. Sita Luyun nodded. Since that's the case, why should we care if he can really reach the 7th level of the Heaven Ascension platform? Besides, the Heaven Ascension platform has lost most of its function, but no other outer disciples can set foot on the 7th level. 5 people can set foot on the 6th level. With a smile in his eyes, the Right Guardian smiled and continued. Everything will come to a conclusion at the Myriad Sword Conference. No matter how unfathomable that kid is, no matter how deep he hides, it will naturally be made public at the Myriad Sword Conference. At that time, everything will be clear. Ha, that's right, that's right. Sita Luyan laughed and looked at the Right Guardian. He said, it seems that the older the ginger, the spicier it is. Sect Master, don't laugh at this old man. It's just that Sect Master has the entire Shunjian Gate on his shoulders. You care too much. That's why you didn't think of it for a while. As the saying goes, the onlookers see more clearly than the onlookers. That's probably what it means. The Right Guardian smiled. It seems that this Myriad Sword Conference will be unusually lively. Ryugan River, Yinling Feng, Gongqi, Gu Chunyu, Oluo, Sakura, Asaka. These little guys have been waiting for 5 years. They are all waiting for this Myriad Sword Conference. This Myriad Sword Conference is already a fierce competition, and now, with Su Yi, I'm still looking forward to it. Situ Liuyun's eyes moved, and there was a red light flowing in his eyes. Every junior's name that he mentioned represented the future hope and foundation of Xinjiang Gate. This time, the entire Xinjiang Gate had great expectations and hopes for the Myriad Sword Conference. Sect Master, have you forgotten that there is still one more person? The Right Guardian spoke and reminded Situ Liyun. You're talking about. Hearing this, Situ Liyun's expression immediately stiffened, and then he revealed a bitter smile and said, I forgot about that little grandaunt. You said that if Su Yi is really Elder Su's disciple, then wouldn't that be? Chapter M, unspecified currency section / 1-4B. After saying that, Situ Liyun's heroic and oppressive face looked as if he was about to cry. With a bit of grievance that normal people would not be able to see, he said to the Right Protector, Why do I, the head of the Divine Sword School, feel so wronged? The Right Guardian was also very helpless. He looked at Situ Liyun and also felt wronged, and said, If Su Yi is really Elder Su's disciple, then in the entire Xinjiang Gate, there are not many people who are not wronged. That's true. Situ Liyun was very helpless, and had an expression of resignation. He then said, I feel that Elder Bai's words are somewhat reasonable. Su Yi is very daring, but I hope that he won't act recklessly in the Myriad Sword battlefield. There shouldn't be anyone who acts recklessly in the Myriad Sword battlefield. The Right Guardian's eyes moved and said, And half a month later, all the direct disciples will enter. Naturally, there will be people who will restrain Su Yi, and he won't be able to do anything. Chapter 417. Immediately after, Situ Liyun seemed to have thought of something and said, And that little fellow Mu Yang, I wonder how he will perform in the battlefield of 10,000 swords this time. Sect Master, there's no need to worry. Although Mu Yang is young, I reckon that among the younger generation in Xinjiang Gate, apart from Yun Lingfeng, Ryugan River, and a few others, there aren't many who could do anything to him. The Right Protector spoke with an unconcealable look of shock on his face. He knew that apart from Yun Lingfeng, Ryugan River, Gongqi, and other people whose talents were close to abnormal, there was actually another little fellow who was equally terrifying. It was a pity that he was still too young, and even in the entire sect, there were only a few people who knew of his existence. Haha, this Myriad Sword Conference is just for him to hone himself in advance, Situ Liyun said with a smile. In the dense forest, there were continuous mountains. The battlefield of 10,000 swords was vast, and the strength of all the outer sect disciples who entered was close to 20,000. However, only a few of them could reach the profound origin realm. Those who could reach the 8th or 9th level of the essence soul realm were considered not weak. Therefore, this group of outer sect disciples could not fly, and had to walk through the battlefield of 10,000 swords. In fact, not to mention this group of outer sect disciples, even inner sect disciples had to reach the essence spirit realm if they wanted to transform their vitality. And among the outer sect disciples, there was probably no one who could reach the Tao essence spirit realm. Moreover, to transform one's vitality, to cross the battlefield of 10,000 swords, the consumption was enormous. It was not something that an essence spirit realm could support. Moreover, the scattered sword pattern stones in the battlefield of 10,000 swords needed to be found by oneself. Therefore, all the disciples were destined to cross the battlefield of 10,000 swords step by step and experience many hardships. The mountains were connected, and in a wide area, there were a total of 600 to 700 outer sect disciples gathered. At this moment, there were close to 30 young men opposite these hundreds of outer sect disciples. From their attire, there was no doubt that they were all inner sect disciples of Xinjiang Gate. When these 30-plus inner court disciples saw 600 to 700 outer court disciples appear in front of them, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded and stunned. After a while, they gradually recovered from their shock and looked at each other in dismay. Senior Brother Jianyu, what should we do now? An inner sect disciple whispered to a disciple who seemed to be the leader. The appearance of so many outer sect disciples had completely stunned them. This was completely different from what they had planned. In their plan, regardless of whether it was from the 5th or 4th level of the Sky Ascension platform, the outer disciples who entered the battlefield of 1,000 swords would eventually pass through this area. They had calculated the time and location and originally wanted to wait here for a few lucky outer sect disciples and take them in as their followers. In the battlefield of 10,000 swords, they had to be wary of the personal disciples who would enter the battlefield. They also had to face the dangers and savage beasts that could appear at any time. If they could recruit a few followers, they would be able to strengthen their influence and have more people searching for the sword pattern stones. At that time, if there was danger, he would have a few more cannon fodder. It was simply killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Why not? From what they had heard, many inner sect disciples had set up strongholds nearby, waiting for the outer sect disciples who were lucky enough to enter the battlefield of 1,000 swords. Therefore, they secretly ran to the front, hoping to be the first to take the initiative and gain the upper hand. This was also one of the routes that many people would take, and they definitely wouldn't leave it empty. However, these inner sect disciples didn't expect that they indeed didn't leave it empty, and waited for the outer sect disciples who were lucky enough to enter the battlefield of 1,000 swords. However, they didn't dare to imagine that so many outer sect disciples would appear this time. It was said that in previous batches of the Sky Ascension platform, more than 100 outer sect disciples had the opportunity to enter the battlefield of 1,000 swords. And now, there were 600 to 700 people in front of them, and this was only one route. Although the outer sect disciples who walked out of the 2 Sky Ascension portals would all head in this direction, there were many routes in this crisscrossing mountain range. There must be more routes if there were 600 to 700 outer sect disciples on one route. At the thought of this, these inner sect disciples couldn't help but be shocked. Could it be that the outer sect disciples this time were so strong? There were actually so many of them entering the battlefield of 1,000 swords. The inner sect disciple who was called Jianyu was about 20 years old, and he had an extraordinary aura. He looked at the hundreds of outer sect disciples in front of him, composed himself, and said to the people around him in a low voice, "Don't panic, follow the original plan. Although there are more people, there are still outer sect disciples. There's nothing to worry about, and this is actually a good thing." Hearing Jianyu's words, the inner sect disciples around him instantly puffed out their chests, feeling emboldened. Indeed, no matter how many people there were, they were still outer sect disciples. They were inner sect disciples, and there was nothing to worry about. Su Yi, Su Jiahui, and Zhang Qing walked on the mountain path. Along the way, there were obvious messy footprints, which proved that the large group of outer sect disciples in front of them had also passed by here. Just head in this direction. This is just the beginning, and it shouldn't be too dangerous. It is said that the closer we are to the exit, the more dangerous it is, Zhang Qing said. Be careful, and be careful, Su Jiahui reminded. She didn't dare to let her guard down in the battlefield of 1,000 swords. Su Yi, on the other hand, seemed rather relaxed. He looked around, hoping to meet a few barbaric beasts. Yeah, there seems to be quite a number of people in front. Suddenly, Su Yi noticed something. There were many figures gathered at the wide road between the mountains in front of them. From afar, there were at least 600 to 700 people. They were all dressed in outer sect disciple robes, and there was a lot of noise. Something must have happened, Zhang Qing said in a low voice, following Su Yi's gaze to the front. Let's go and take a look. Su Yi thought for a while and decided to take a look. Anyway, there weren't many existences in the battlefield of 1,000 swords that could threaten him. Don't go overboard. We're not easy to bully. This is too much. They are clearly bullying us outer sect disciples. Clamorous voices rang out from the crowd of outer court disciples. Their faces were filled with anger. Jianyu looked at the group of outer sect disciples in front of him, and his face was slightly gloomy. He said faintly, "What are you arguing about? Didn't I say it clearly enough? Follow us, and we will protect your safety in the battlefield of 1,000 swords. We will be a team in the future, and as a show of sincerity, you will hand over all your elixir pills to us for safekeeping. Why, this is too much. The inner sect disciples are too much of a bully. Look at the In Addition chapter, section $3. Chapter 4:18. Jian, you made it sound simple, but he was clearly robbing them. He said that he was here to safeguard the elixirs, but in reality, he was trying to rob them of their already scarce elixirs. When the time came, all the opportunities found in the myriad sword battlefield would have to be handed over to these inner court disciples. This was a blatant exploitation, because they had heard of this matter in the sect. In the previous myriad sword conferences, many inner court disciples had also dealt with outer court disciples in this manner. The final outcome could be imagined. What's with the noise? Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Do you want to die? Looking at the noisy group of outer court disciples, a tall and sturdy inner court disciple with a stern expression bellowed. His eyes were filled with coldness as his aura instantly spread out. It seemed that if he didn't make a move to intimidate them, he wouldn't be able to succeed today. Who wants to die? Step forward. Do you want to die? Instantly, each and every inner court disciple understood. Waves of Yuan profound realm aura swept out from their bodies and gathered together. Sand and stones flew, and dried branches and broken leaves were swept up. The momentum was rather shocking. Facing the aura of this group of inner court disciples, the group of outer court disciples instantly trembled inwardly. The cultivation of an outer court disciple at the 7th or 8th level of the essence spirit stage was already considered extremely high. The cultivation of this group of outer court disciples was mostly at the 5th or 6th level of the essence spirit stage. How could they be compared to these inner court disciples who had already reached the 4th or 5th level of the essence profound stage, and even had a few auras that were close to the essence spirit stage? We can choose not to follow you and mind our own business. If you're anxious, we have so many people, and we're not to be trifled with. Among the group of outer court disciples who were trembling inwardly, a tall and sturdy young man gritted his teeth and spoke. These inner court disciples were indeed not something they could deal with. However, they had 600 to 700 people, which was more than 20 times more than these outer court disciples. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. Once they fought 20 against 1, they wouldn't lose by much. That's right. We have so many people, and we're not to be trifled with. You're going too far. At most, we'll fight. Instantly, a bold outer court disciple echoed as he raised his arms and shouted, "Fight! We're not to be trifled with. I'll go all out. I definitely can't hand over the medicinal pills." In a split second, the outer sect disciples moved one after another. Their auras fluctuated, and hundreds of people were filled with indignation. Their combined auras were even stronger than those of the 20 to 30 inner disciples. To these outer court disciples, all of them knew that the myriad sword battlefield was extremely dangerous. As outer sect disciples, they were already lacking in resources, and the medicinal pills they had on them were rare items. They knew that if they handed over their medicinal pills, they wouldn't even be able to replenish their supplies when they encountered danger. It was already difficult to cross the battlefield of 10,000 swords in the first place. Now, it would be even more difficult. Moreover, these inner disciples were not even direct disciples, and even direct disciples had the possibility of dying in the myriad sword battlefield. At that time, if they were to encounter danger, these inner sect disciples would not even be able to fend for themselves. They would probably only use them as cannon fodder. Why would they care about their lives? Looking at the indignant outer sect disciples, the inner sect disciples' faces darkened. In front of such an imposing aura, they really did not have any confidence. With their cultivation and strength, they could completely disregard these outer court disciples. However, if one person were to fight against 20 outer court disciples, it would be a little different. Jian Yu's face was very ugly, and it was completely gloomy. His gaze swept across the outer court disciples in front of him, and finally fixed on the tall young man who was leading the crowd. A cold look flashed across his face, and he said in a deep voice, "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Little outer court disciple, do you really think that you can become an inner sect disciple just because you can enter the myriad sword battlefield? Even if it's outside, killing you is equivalent to killing a dog, let alone in the myriad sword battlefield. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish today." As soon as his voice fell, Yuan Shi gushed out from Jian Yu's feet, and his figure immediately charged towards the tall young man who was leading the crowd. At that moment, the tall young man's hair stood on end, and he couldn't help but shudder in his heart. Jian Yu's figure was already in front of him, and his aura was not something he could contend against. When Jian Yu's figure appeared in an instant, he moved his arm, and a fist directly blasted towards the former's chest. It was swift and fierce, and there was not much mercy. The force contained in the fist was even more powerful, and a woo-woo sound resounded in the air. The tall outer court disciple's face changed drastically, and he didn't even have much strength to react. He could only instinctively throw a punch in a panic. Bang! However, it was too late. Jian Yu's fist, which contained a violent force, exploded with Yuan Shi light. It was incomparably fast, and had already firmly wrapped around the outer court disciple's chest. A low muffled sound immediately rang out. Kacha! When a muffled sound of energy rang out, it was mixed with the sound of bones breaking. Ah! A shrill scream immediately rang out. Poochie! The tall young man made a poochie sound, and a large mouthful of dark red blood mist was spat out. His body was immediately sent flying, and he landed heavily on the ground several feet away. A group of outer court disciples subconsciously retreated in panic, but there were still a few people who were hit, and they staggered back. In the end, they fell to the ground on their butts, and their faces were deathly pale. "You were also very enthusiastic just now." Jian Yu did not stop. Then he stared at the second outer court disciple who was shouting the loudest just now. When the first outer court disciple's face changed drastically, and he did not react in time, Jian Yu angrily punched his shoulder. Bang! Poochie! With a muffled sound and a mouthful of blood, the disciple was directly sent flying. He landed on the ground, and his shoulder was covered in blood, dripping with blood. Two people were sent flying in an instant, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Such a scene stunned everyone present, and they were all stunned on the spot. Jian Yu looked at the crowd with a cold gaze. He was very satisfied with the result. In such a situation, as long as he suppressed a few of the leaders, it was enough to shock everyone present. Poochie, not far away, the two outer court disciples were still vomiting blood, and their bodies were twitching. They did not seem to be dead, but with such serious injuries, it was hard to say whether they were still alive. The group of outer court disciples, who were originally indignant, suddenly quietened down. Jian Yu's attack just now had deeply shocked them. Only then did they realize that compared to the inner court disciples, they were really weak. Su is here. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside the crowd. Chapter 419. Jian Yu and the other inner sect disciples' faces darkened. They had heard of Su Yi's name, especially Jian Yu. Back then, when Su Yi and Jian Shi fought at the Holy Sword Cliff, Jian Yu was present and he was deeply shocked. What's going on? Su Yi, Su Jiehui, and Zhang Qing walked over and heard the fight from afar. When they saw the commotion in the crowd, they frowned slightly. It's Su Yi. When they saw Su Yi walking over, they felt that his figure was too familiar. All the outer sect disciples had just come from the Heaven Ascension platform, and it was still vivid in their minds. How could they forget it? That young man was on top of the Heaven Ascension platform. The wind was blowing and the clouds were surging. Strange phenomena were descending from the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The sky changed colors. He was alone at the top of the Heaven Ascension platform. How shocking was that? When they thought of that scene, they could not help but feel their hair stand on end. Looking at Su Yi, the group of outer sect disciples subconsciously made way for him. Some of them even stood behind Su Yi without leaving a trace. Su Yi, these inner sect disciples want us outer sect disciples to hand over our elixir pills and follow them. This is clearly too much. They are bullying us outer sect disciples. In the crowd, a bolder outer sect disciple spoke softly to Su Yi. To them, Su Yi was also an outer sect disciple. At that moment, they naturally stood behind Su Yi and hoped that Su Yi would stand up for them. Su Yi had originally come to take a look at the situation. When he heard the fight and saw the expressions of the group of outer sect disciples and the two severely injured disciples on the ground, he roughly knew what had happened. The weak were prey to the strong. Even in a mountain sect, this was a normal thing. After all, this was a world where martial arts were respected. Su Yi had long been used to this. Therefore, Su Yi did not intend to meddle in other people's business. It was not that he wanted to help the outer sect disciples. He could protect them once, but it was impossible for him to protect them in the battlefield of 1,000 swords. Moreover, these outer sect disciples had nothing to do with him. Given Su Yi's character, this had nothing to do with him. The crowd had been opening up a path for Su Yi. Su Yi, Su Jiahui, and Zhongqing quickly walked to the front and saw the 20 to 30 inner sect disciples. These inner sect disciples seemed to know about Su Yi. Their gazes fell on Su Yi and their expressions subconsciously. His name was Shuing. Su Yi's name had already spread among the inner disciples. Moreover, there were many inner sect disciples present. They had seen Su Yi defeat Sword 11 at the Holy Sword Cliff with their own eyes. At this moment, they saw the familiar young man in front of them and were naturally afraid. They knew that they were no match for Sword 11. Moreover, Sword 11 had been defeated by Su Yi. If Su Yi stood up for these outer sect disciples, it would be troublesome. Su Yi walked through the crowd and glanced at the two severely injured outer sect disciples lying on the ground. He frowned slightly and then returned to normal. Finally, his gaze swept across the 20 to 30 inner sect disciples. At this moment, Su Yi's indifferent gaze made the hearts of the 20 to 30 inner sect disciples tremble for no reason. They did not dare to look directly at him and felt their hair stand on end. There was silence. The entire place was strangely silent at this moment. This has nothing to do with you. You can leave. Jianyu looked a little nervous. Facing Su Yi's indifferent gaze, she felt very uncomfortable and could not help but speak. Okay. Su Yi nodded. Seeing Su Yi nod his head, Jianyu and the other inner sect disciples' expressions suddenly relaxed. They felt as if they had been pardoned. Su Yi did not seem to intend to meddle in the affairs of these outer sect disciples. This was what they wanted to see the most. Seeing Su Yi nod his head, the outer sect disciples could not help but look at each other. They felt as if they had just seen a life-saving straw and were about to drown again. Su Yi did not seem to intend to meddle in other people's business. This was what they wanted to see the most. Su Jiahui and Zhongqing's expressions did not change much. They more or less knew Su Yi's character. Su Yi was not the kind of person who liked to meddle in other people's business. Just as the outer sect disciples and inner sect disciples had completely different expressions, Su Yi's gaze still landed on the 20 to 30 inner sect disciples with a calm expression. Su even had a slight smile on his face. He was very polite and very concerned as he said to the ladies, "Everyone, the battlefield of 10,000 swords is very dangerous. It's not a good place. You must pay attention to your safety and not be careless." Hearing Su Yi's words, the inner sect disciples could not help but be secretly surprised and puzzled. "We will be careful." Jianyu was also very puzzled, but she still replied, "How about this? This battlefield of 10,000 swords is too dangerous. For your safety, hand over your space bags, elixirs, and so on to me for safekeeping. This way, if anything happens, I will be able to take care of you." Su Yi looked at the group of inner sect disciples and said with an incomparably serious expression. His expression was as if he was completely thinking for the sake of these inner sect disciples. He was simply doing a good deed. Hearing Su Yi's words, all the outer sect disciples present were stunned. Su Jiahui and Zhongqing were also secretly moved and looked at each other. The ones whose expressions changed the most were the group of inner sect disciples. Their faces were all stunned as they suddenly looked at Sue-yi. Their stunned expressions froze. These inner sect disciples had just thought that Sue-yi would not meddle in other people's business and felt as if they had been granted amnesty. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, Sue-yi had already targeted them without even turning his face. Safekeeping the space bags and elixirs was almost no different from dealing with these outer sect disciples. Sue-yi, don't go too far. There are so many of us, and we're all inner sect disciples. You won't have it easy. Jianyu gritted her teeth and looked at Sue-yi. They had no choice but to be wary of such a terrifying outer sect disciple who had defeated Sword 11. A dog biting Lu Dongbin. You don't know how to appreciate kindness. I'm safekeeping your worldly possessions for your own good. If you really don't understand, I think I can only use my own method to persevere. Sue-yi stood there with a calm expression and a smile on his face. Are you trying to rob us? We're inner sect disciples. We're not to be trifled with. Jianyu mustered her courage, and her expression darkened. Chapter 420. Moreover, in the battlefield of 10,000 swords, the sect would turn a blind eye to certain matters. As long as one didn't go overboard in the battlefield of 10,000 swords, there was nothing they could do. The experts and elders in the sect would also turn a blind eye to such matters. All the disciples were in the battlefield of 10,000 swords for the sole purpose of allowing the younger generation of disciples to hone themselves in the battlefield of 10,000 swords, so there weren't many rules. The reason they were here was to deal with the outer sect disciples and seize their elixir pills. However, the difference now was that they had become the prey in the blink of an eye. It seems like you guys don't understand my efforts. Well, if everyone in this world understood me, how ordinary would I be? Sue-yi seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to Jianyu and the rest. As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly walked towards Jianyu and the rest. What are you trying to do? Seeing Sue-yi walking towards them, Jianyu and the rest were shocked. They slowly retreated and stared at Sue-yi. Their hands involuntarily unsheathed their treasured swords as their auras fluctuated. I'm just keeping your worldly possessions safe, Sue-yi said faintly. He continued to walk forward without stopping. To be honest, Sue-yi didn't have any special feelings for Jianyu and the rest. However, he had been suppressed in terms of alcohol tolerance from the start. After all, he was at the age where he was full of vigor, so he naturally wouldn't give in so easily. New 4S best *0, get on Y Cool Craftsman net $. Let's attack together and risk it all. Jianyu gritted his teeth and said. He had no choice but to risk it all. As an inner sect disciple, and at the age where he was full of vigor, he wouldn't admit defeat. At the very least, he had to risk it all. Let's attack together and risk it all. Buzz buzz. Instantly, a group of inner sect disciples formed an encirclement formation. Sword light filled the air as waves of profound origin realm aura filled the air. When they gathered together, it was quite a sight to behold. Swish, 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 swish. Sword chi surged as a sharp aura swept across the sky. More than 10 people had already taken the initiative to attack Sue-yi. Sword light enveloped Sue-yi. Dozens of sword chi swept over at the same time, enveloping all directions. These people knew how strong Sue-yi was, so they didn't hold back from the beginning and went all out. Sue-yi stood there, his shoulder-length black hair dancing in the wind. At the same time, Sue-yi's eyes twitched slightly. The yuan chi in the soles of his feet moved, and his figure instantly dragged out an afterimage. Bang, bang, bang. Boom. In an instant, the surrounding aura rumbled and muffled sounds spread out. Pucha screams of agony rang out, accompanied by the spurting of blood. Then, under the shocked gazes of hundreds of outer sect disciples, one figure after another was sent flying, coughing up blood as they crashed to the ground. Bang, bang, bang. A series of muffled sounds of energy exploding out, emitting a terrifying aura and sharp force, accompanied by figures flying backwards. Around them, treasured swords flew out of their hands and fell into the distance. Then, waves of sword light shattered, and figures shot out one after another. Puff, puff. Blood spurted out of their mouths. Their hair was messy, their clothes were tattered, and their bodies were cut open. Blood flowed out, and in some places white bones could be seen. Their badly mutilated bodies flew out of the carriage. These figures crashed to the ground, and they were Jianyu and the other inner sect flutes. Screams of agony rang out, and they were severely injured. Every one of them was seriously injured, and only a few of them were left screaming on the verge of death. Their chests and abdomens were dripping with blood. More than 30 inner sect disciples couldn't even withstand a single blow in a short period of time. They were no match for him at all, and all of them were severely injured. Dumbfounded. Everyone was completely dumbfounded. Su Jiahui and Zhang Qing were even more shocked, and they couldn't help but shiver. They originally thought that Su Yi wouldn't meddle in other people's business, but who knew that Su Yi would suddenly come to such a place? Su Yi's light flickered, and a cold light spread out. He didn't look at the people lying on the ground screaming, and kept the 20 to 30 inner sect disciples' spatial bags into his own spatial bag. Although these 30 inner sect disciples weren't weak, none of them were Su Yi's match. In addition, with Su Yi's current cultivation, how could he be a match for them? With Su Yi's current strength and alcohol tolerance, how could these inner sect disciples be a match for him? Even if they were at the essence spirit realm, they wouldn't be a match for him. Many figures struggled to get up, and then looked at Su Yi with shock in their eyes. They originally thought that they had more people on their side, and if they could go all out, they would at least die. But how could these inner sect disciples be a match for Su Yi? They were all severely injured in an instant, and weren't a match for him at all. Swords fell to the ground one by one, and figures spat out blood one after another. Although the 30 inner sect disciples weren't a match for Su Yi, none of them were able to contend against him, and all of them were severely injured. Su Yi single-handedly suppressed almost 30 inner sect disciples. One by one, the inner sect disciples were severely injured, and it was inexplicably shocking. These inner sect disciples were very strong, and their average cultivation was at the 4th or 5th level of the essence profound realm, which was already very terrifying. Spatial bags. There are spiritual herbs here, and the effects are not bad. Subsequently, Su Yi muttered as he stood beside the bodies that were in terrible states. He collected all of the medicinal pills, spiritual herbs, and interspatial bags from bodies. This was the battlefield of 10,000 swords, although these outer sect disciples had nothing to do with him. But this time, Su Yi really did collect the items from these inner sect disciples into his own hands. Su Yi didn't intend to stand up for anyone, but in the end, he had no other choice. These inner sect disciples were all wealthy, and they even had personal disciples behind them. Su Yi was just thinking about how to deal with these inner sect disciples, and he didn't expect them to come knocking on his door. Figures were lying on the ground in a disorderly manner, and Su didn't hesitate to collect all the spatial bags from those figures. Ordinary outer sect disciples didn't have spatial bags on them, but among the Shunjian Gate's inner sect disciples, only 80 to 90 of them would have spatial bags. Although the spatial bags were worth as much as the Lotus Pond, and even in the entire barbarian city, not many people would want them. However, these inner sect disciples, as inner sect disciples of the Divine Sword sect, were from large sections. It was indeed nothing special for them to have interspatial bags. But the mistake was that this was the battlefield of 10,000 swords. Dozens of inner sect disciples were severely injured and on the verge of death, and Su Yi didn't show any mercy when he attacked. In terms of cultivation, these inner sect disciples were on average at the 5th or 6th level of the essence profound realm. So how could they be a match for Su Yi? Right now, Su Yi's true cultivation was only at the 4th level of the origin spirit stage. However, in terms of combat strength, Su Yi had long surpassed that level. Chapter 4:21. Of course, Su Yi did not intend to take all of them. He left behind the treasured swords that the inner sect disciples relied on. The disciples of Shunjian Gate relied on swords. This was the battlefield of 10,000 swords. There could be danger at any time. With a sword in hand, they would have more power to protect themselves. After packing up everything, Su-yi clapped his hands. Under hundreds of stunned gazes, he called Su Jiahui and Zhang Qing, who were still somewhat stunned, and left. Looking at the three figures, especially the eye-catching young man with a sword on his back, hundreds of gazes could not calm down for a long time. Some of them secretly gasped. However, not many outer sect disciples were particularly surprised. After all, Su-yi could already defeat Sword 11. On the Heaven Ascension platform, everyone had also witnessed this shocking scene. Therefore, the 20 to 30 inner sect disciples in front of them were existences that were difficult for outer sect disciples to contend with. However, in front of Su-yi, this requirement of inner sect disciples was naturally not enough. Su-yi has stood up for us. Su-yi is an outer sect disciple of the 36 Sword Peak. He is an outer sect disciple like us. He is standing up for us. Some outer sect disciples who were present then discussed. They believed that Su-yi's attack on Jianyu and the others was actually to stand up for them. Jianyu and the other inner sect disciples were lying on the ground one by one with blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. Their faces were pale, and it took them a long time to catch their breath. The inner sect disciples stared at Su-yi's departing figure with complicated feelings in their hearts. In the battlefield of 10,000 swords, it had always been outer sect disciples. Even if they were lucky enough to enter, they would eventually become the followers of inner sect disciples. That was what they thought as well. However, who would have thought that they would encounter Su-yi and end up like this? Everything that they had was taken away from them. These inner sect disciples even knew that they would not even have the chance to take revenge. Su-yi was too terrifying. Even if they waited for the personal disciples of the Sword Peak to come, they would not be able to do anything to him. After all, even Sword 11 was defeated. The ancient trees were like dragons, vigorous and powerful, with luxuriant branches and leaves. They stood tall and straight with their heads held high in the sky, and their crowns and branches overlapped with each other, causing the entire mountain forest to be enveloped in a layer of mysterious and deep ancient atmosphere. Brother Su-yi, will we be in trouble? Zhang Qing followed behind Su-yi and asked amidst the crunching sounds of falling leaves and twigs. This is the battlefield of 10,000 swords, and there are dangers everywhere. Their cultivations are not strong enough, so I'm taking care of their spatial bags for them. How could there be any trouble? When the time comes, they will be extremely grateful to me. Su-yi said seriously, but his mind was not careless. His eyes were also constantly looking around, afraid that danger would appear at any time. PFFF, upon hearing Su-yi's words, Su Jiahui could not help but chuckle. This fella's too thick-skinned. He's clearly snatching someone else's interspatial bag, but he's making it sound like it's true. Cool e-craftsman equals net not many people in the world could be so thick-skinned as to keep someone else's interspatial bag. Zhang Qing was also helpless. However, when she thought about how Bai Yi, Wang Qi, Hu Dongxiu, and the others' interspatial bags were also snatched by Su-yi, and nothing happened in the end, she was not so worried anymore. We seemed to have met again. All of a sudden, Su-yi stopped in his tracks and looked ahead with a slight smile on his face. What do you mean we've met again? Are there people? Or are they savage beasts? Upon hearing that, Zhang Qing and Su Jiahui were instantly on guard. Their auras fluctuated, and they were on guard as if they were facing a great enemy. They're still in front. Su-yi smiled faintly and continued to walk forward. After walking for a few hundred feet and turning into a dense forest, Zhang Qing and Su Jiahui discovered that there were 200 to 300 figures gathered in the ancient forest in front of them. Those figures were dressed in outer court disciples' attire. Their auras fluctuated, and it was noisy. Zhang Qing and Su Jiahui were secretly shocked. Only then did they realize that Su-yi was much stronger than them. To think that this fellow had already sensed his aura from several dozen feet away without even seeing him. Just how powerful was that? It seems that there are inner court disciples here. Could it be? Su Jiahui looked up and frowned slightly. There were so many people here, and their auras fluctuated. Not long ago, they were probably inner court disciples who wanted to snatch the outer court disciples who entered the battlefield of 1,000 swords. Hee, let's go take a look. Su Yi's eyes and face were full of smiles. In front of them, there were about 300 to 400 outer court disciples clustered around, and all of them looked angry. 20 to 30 inner court disciples sneered as they looked at the outer court disciples in front of them. Although they were shocked by the huge number of outer court disciples, they did not think much of it. To these inner court disciples, they did not know why so many outer court disciples had successfully reached the 4th level of the heavenly platform and entered the battlefield of 1,000 swords in this year's Myriad Sword Conference. However, this was a good thing for them. At least they had more followers, and their chances of finding the Sword Vein Stone would be higher. This group of inner court disciples was also from the same Sword Peak, and they were waiting to intercept the outer court disciples who entered the battlefield of 1,000 swords. It seemed that there were also outer court disciples from the same Sword Peak among this group of outer court disciples. 34 outer court disciples retreated to the side and stood behind the group of inner court disciples. Since they were all from the same Sword Peak, these inner court disciples did not rob them. After all, these inner court disciples usually listen to them. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Hand over your elixirs and follow us in the battlefield of 1,000 swords. When the time comes, we will bring you out of the battlefield of 1,000 swords. Otherwise, we will not be polite to you. The group of inner court disciples looked at the group of outer court disciples and sneered. Their auras fluctuated, and they were extremely arrogant. Personal disciples do not dare to say that they can walk out of the battlefield of 1,000 swords for sure. There is a possibility that they will die. Where did you get the courage and confidence to say that? Among the outer court disciples, someone spoke out boldly. They were not stupid, and naturally, they did not want to be plundered by these inner court disciples. In the end, they would become followers and obey their orders. I think that you are going to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. The face of the inner court disciple who spoke earlier instantly turned gloomy. There was an 8th level Yuan profound realm aura fluctuating, and elemental Yuan Qi radiance enveloped his body. The radiance was dazzling and sharp. How lively! Right at this moment, a faint voice sounded out. Amidst the hustle and bustle, the voice could still be heard clearly. Everyone's gaze immediately turned towards the source of the voice. When they saw the figure that was approaching, their eyes were filled with excitement. Brother Su Yi, Zhang Qing, junior sister Jiahui. Brother Su Yi, Zhang Qing, junior sister Jiahui. Chapter 422. It was Su Yi, Zhang Qing, and Su Jiahui. Looking at this lineup, Su Yi could roughly guess what had happened from afar. The 3 young men ran over excitedly, as if they had seen their family. Lu Ji, Wang Fan, Tan Chao, you're here. Seeing the 3 young men running over, Zhang Qing and Su Jiahui were surprised and then overjoyed. Yes, we've been looking for you. It's good to see you. The 3 young men were very happy and could not hide their joy. They immediately went to Su Yi's side. Su Yi knew these 3 young men. They were Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and Tan Chao. They were also outer sect disciples on the 36th Sword Peak. Are you okay? Su Yi asked Lu Ji and the other 2. He glanced around and found that they had just met and there were no signs of fighting. We're fine. It's just that the inner sect disciples on the 13th Sword Peak wanted to rob us and make us work for them. We didn't obey, so they took action. Lu Ji spoke. He was taller than Zhang Qing, and his eyes were bright. At this moment, he stood beside Su Yi as if he had found someone to rely on and was no longer nervous. It's Su Yi. Su Yi is here. He's also an outer sect disciple. With Su Yi's arrival, the outer sect disciples were in an uproar. They discussed, and some people stood behind Su Yi subconsciously. Soon, Su Yi did not step forward at all, but a group of outer sect disciples took the initiative to stand behind Su Yi and pushed Su Yi to the front. The group of inner sect disciples looked at Su-yi, but their faces were suddenly conflicted and their expressions became very complicated. His name was Shuing. Naturally, they had all heard of Su-yi's name. Just defeating the 11th sword was enough to make them tremble in fear at this moment. Moreover, they had also heard of how Su-yi dealt with Hua Dongxiu, Ba-yi, Wang Qi, and the others. Just thinking about it made them tremble. If Su-yi wanted to stand up for these outer sect disciples, they would not be a match for him. Su-yi, this has nothing to do with you. The disciples of the 36th Sword Peak can also leave. The leader of the inner sect disciples gritted his teeth and spoke first. He did not want to offend Su-yi. There were outer sect disciples of the 36th Sword Peak present, so naturally they did not dare to make a move. Thank you. Su-yi nodded slightly with a smile in his eyes. Looking at the group of inner sect disciples before him, it was as if he had just seen his family. You're welcome, said the leader of the inner court disciples. All the inner court disciples present were surprised, and some of them were startled by his words. Su-yi was actually so courteous to them. He looked at them with a kind gaze, as if he had seen his family. This made them secretly feel that they had gained face. At this moment, he was being so polite. Sigh. Looking at the flattered expressions of the inner sect disciples, Zhang Qing and Su Jiahui could only feel helpless. Some people screamed, some vomited blood, and some flew out. Everything was so chaotic that the disciples present were dazzled. Poochie bang bang bang. Then the group of inner sect disciples vomited blood and fell to the ground one by one. They were all covered in blood, and their faces were pale. They could no longer fight. Soon, everything calmed down. None of the inner sect disciples were able to stand up. Su-yi withdrew his yuan qi and clapped his hands, his expression calm and collected. See, I told you that the battlefield of 10,000 swords is dangerous. You didn't believe me. Now, I can keep your space bags for you. Su-yi spoke calmly with a smile on his face. He took out the space bags from the bodies of the inner disciples lying on the ground one by one and stuffed them into his clothes skillfully. His clothes were stuffed to the brim. These inner sect disciples' faces were filled with anger and shock. They didn't dare to struggle anymore. Chapter 4:23. The group of outer sect disciples were dumbfounded as they looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. But without a doubt, these outer sect disciples were secretly delighted. The inner sect disciples who had looked down on him earlier were now being taught a lesson. This was karma. Let's go. After packing up, Su-yi waved at Su Jiahui and the rest and left. Lu Ji, Tan Chao, and Wang Fan were still in a daze as they followed behind in astonishment. Should we follow Su-yi? He probably won't bring us. They are all from the 36th Sword Peak, but we are not. It's good enough that he can stand up for us. Looking at the backs of Su-yi's group, some of the outer sect disciples wanted to chase after them, but they did not dare as they knew that Su-yi would not bring so many of them. The group of inner sect disciples lay on the ground with ashen faces. It was a tragic sight. Inside the myriad sword battlefield, there was not much difference from the outside world. There was also the sun, the moon, and the stars, the sunset, and the rising sun. At dusk, the sunset glow shrouded the boundless mountains. Su-yi's group of 5 once again encountered a group of inner sect disciples. There were many of them, no less than 50, and the one leading them was almost at the origin spirit stage. This group of inner sect disciples had already subdued several hundred outer sect disciples. It was a majestic sight, and their aura was not weak at all. However, there wasn't a single trace of happiness on the faces of those outer court disciples. They had originally thought that they would be able to obtain some kind of opportunity and fortune after arriving at the myriad sword battlefield. Who would have thought that the moment they entered, they would be suppressed and plundered by inner sect disciples, and even forced to become servants? When they saw Su-yi's group of 6, some of these inner sect disciples recognized Su-yi, and their faces twitched. For the sake of their face and aura, they did not retreat, but they also did not plan to attack. Hello everyone, There are many dangers in the myriad sword battlefield. Please be careful. When Sui saw this group of inner sect disciples, it was as if he had seen his family, and he immediately walked up to them enthusiastically. After that, everything happened so suddenly. Within a short period of time, a group of inner sect disciples were taken down by Sui in the most efficient way possible. They screamed miserably and wanted to cry, but no tears came out. I've already told you that this place is very dangerous. I'll take care of your space bags. As Su Jiahui and Zhang Qing were already used to the helpless and bitter smile on Su Yi's face, He kept the interspatial bags one by one into his bulging clothes. On the other hand, Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and Tan Chao were still in a daze. When our Sword Peak's personal disciples come in, they won't let you go. An inner sect disciple shouted angrily. He was frightened and angry. I only do good deeds, not asking about the future. He waved his hand and continued to walk away. At this moment, night had already fallen. After a while, He found a secluded place on a cliff. The surrounding terrain was high, and his vision was wide. If there was any danger, he would be able to detect it immediately. The moon was bright, and the stars were dim. The night wind blew gently. Occasionally, the roars of beasts could be heard from the vast mountain range. I heard that there are ferocious, savage beasts in here, but it seems that we have just entered, and we haven't encountered any savage beasts along the way. Zhang Qing heard the roars of beasts from afar and was secretly on guard. Those savage beasts weren't easy to deal with. First Hair, He smiled. He had already sensed the presence of savage beasts along the way. However, it should be because of the invisible aura of the Origin Supreme technique on his body that those savage beasts with lower cultivation didn't dare to come close. They avoided him from afar. He guessed that the other outer court disciples must have encountered quite a number of savage beasts along the way. I heard that there are spiritual herbs and unimaginable fortunes in here. I wonder if it's true. Tan Chao said. He had heard of it before. I've heard of it too. But it shouldn't be easy to get the spiritual herbs. There are so many inner sect disciples here. Even if we get the spiritual herbs, if others know that we are in this myriad sword battlefield, I'm afraid that we won't be able to get them. Lu Ji said, this was the myriad sword battlefield. The Xinjiang Gate wouldn't care too much about anything inside. Even if they got the spiritual herbs, the inner sect disciples would still snatch them away. Several people were discussing. Although they had all entered the myriad sword battlefield, today was only the first day. Originally, they were happy and excited, but now they were completely worried. They knew that if it wasn't for Sui, they would have become the followers of those inner sect disciples. Sui looked around. The spatial bags in his arms were bulging. There were more than 100 of them. I wonder if there are any experts monitoring here. Sui looked around. The myriad sword battlefield was set up by the ancestors of a Xinjiang Gate. He didn't know if there would be any experts spying on them. He had so many spatial bags in his arms, but he could only open them in the mysterious space. Although a soul controller could open them, Sui didn't want to expose his identity. Moreover, with so many spatial bags, he didn't know how long it would take for a soul controller to open them. Let's adjust our breathing first. The deeper we go, the more dangerous it will be. Zhang Qing said. He sat down cross-legged and adjusted his breathing. Gradually, his body emitted an attribute light, and his yuan qi fluctuated. Su Jiahui, Lu Ji, and the rest also put away their thoughts and began their breathing. They were ready to continue their journey tomorrow morning. Oh, the roars of beasts came from afar and echoed in the boundless mountain range. Sui looked at Zhang Qing, Su Jiahui, and the rest and smiled helplessly. These fellows probably hadn't gone through much training in the outside world. They were just meditating without any precaution. They didn't know that there were countless barbaric demon beasts lurking in the vicinity, staring at them. He secretly released some of the Origin Supreme technique's aura. The surrounding savage beasts immediately retreated in fear, not daring to come close. These savage beasts' auras were very weak. They were just small savage beasts. They didn't even have much intelligence. He couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. Su Yi pondered. He had to spend a month in the myriad sword battlefield to look for sword-patterned stones and elixirs. It wouldn't be boring, but it would take a lot of time. He probably couldn't count on Su Jiahui and the rest. He couldn't find much by himself. Suddenly, in the dark night, Su Yi's eyes flashed with a red light, and his expression changed. Then, Su Yi seemed to have thought of something. He stood up and disappeared without a trace. In the darkness of the dense forest, a barbaric demon beast that was 10 feet long quietly walked out. Chapter 424. This barbaric beast was like a wolf or a tiger. Its body was 10 feet long, and it looked strong. There was a golden mark between its eyebrows that made it look even more valiant. At this moment, this barbaric beast was slowly moving forward. Its aura was restrained, and its eyes were emitting a terrifying light in the night sky. A few hundred feet away, under the barbaric beast's gaze, there were a few figures who were adjusting their breathing. Looking at the several figures, the brute demon beast's eyes rippled, as if it was overflowing with joy. The deep black scales on its body began to ripple with light, as if it was about to pounce out at lightning speed. Evil beast! Suddenly, right at this moment, an indistinct shout sounded out. The barbaric beast's expression changed drastically. Its eyes were filled with shock. Instantly, the black light on its body shone brightly, and it pounced in the direction of the voice. Bang! Unfortunately, even though the barbaric demonic beast was fast, someone was even faster. A fist covered in scarlet light landed on the barbaric demonic beast's back like a bolt of lightning. Bang! The barbaric demonic beast was instantly sent flying. It rolled on the ground and let out a blood-curdling roar. Roar! Such a howl was especially ear-piercing in the dark night. It shook one's soul. There's a barbaric beast. Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the others who were sitting cross-legged and adjusting their breathing suddenly stopped. Their bodies immediately tensed up and their expressions changed greatly. Roar! The barbaric beast screamed in pain. It didn't seem to have suffered any serious injuries and was about to get up. With a cold snort, a foot stomped down and landed heavily on the stomach of the barbaric demon beast that was about to get up. Boom! At the same time, a destructive and majestic aura spread out from the sole of the foot. The barbaric beast was about to struggle, but at this moment, it seemed to have sensed something and its body trembled. Its ferocious eyes were filled with fear and shock as it let out a low roar. The figure that appeared was Su Yi. With Su Yi's current spiritual energy, even though this barbaric beast was able to conceal its aura, it definitely wouldn't be able to escape Su Yi's spiritual energy. Su Yi circulated the primordial origin supreme art. Instantly, the primordial demonic beast's eyes were filled with fear and reverence. Dark demon mastiff, but it seems to be somewhat special. Su Yi could tell that it was a dark demonic mastiff. Its bloodline wasn't a match for the dark demonic mastiff. It was only slightly weaker than the dark demonic heavenly leopard. No wonder it dared to launch a sneak attack when ordinary demonic beasts didn't dare to approach it. It was a dark demon mastiff at the 3rd level of the demon profound realm, an earth-attributed savage beast. However, Su Yi felt that the dark hellish demonic mastiff in front of him was somewhat different from the one recorded in the records. 6 new chapters. M-section Shankwa_craftsman from the previous exchange of blows. Su Yi could tell that the dark demon mastiff's combat strength and defense were both shocking. It was far stronger than other savage beasts of the same cultivation level. Is that a savage beast? Is that a dark demon mastiff? Zhang Qing, Su Jiahui, Lu Ji, and the others were alerted and immediately rushed over. The 5 of them weren't surprised when they saw that Su Yi had suppressed the dark demon mastiff with a single kick. However, they were surprised that it was a dark demon mastiff with a high bloodline. Behave yourself. Su Yi withdrew his foot and retracted his aura. Roar! The dark demon mastiff growled and flipped over. Immediately after, Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the others looked at each other in dismay. It actually crawled towards Su Yi with respect in its eyes. Only Su-yi could understand that the dark, infernal, devilish mastiff's growls were in the language of beasts, and they were respectful of Su-yi. Follow me, and one day, I'll give you an opportunity. Otherwise, I'll kill you and make you into soup. Su-yi looked at the dark abyss demonic mastiff. There was an invisible majesty in his eyes. Roar, I'm willing to follow you, master. The dark demon mastiff said in beast language in a low voice. Its body was trembling. It thought that there were a few humans here, and it could eat to its heart's content. It was also a great benefit to obtain the flesh and blood of these humans. However, it didn't expect that there would be a demon expert here. Sensing Su-yi's aura, the dark demon mastiff had already determined that Su-yi was the king of the demon race. A king of the demon race who could shapeshift was not someone it could fight against. That terrifying aura suppressed its beast soul and bloodline, making it unable to resist. Get up. Call me master from now on. Su-yi nodded. The red light in his eyes dimmed. Subduing the dark demon mastiff was within his expectations. However, when Lu Ji, Wang Fan, Zhang Qing, and the others saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. They stared at Su-yi as if they had seen a ghost. Was Su-yi talking to the dark demon mastiff just now? It seemed that the dark demon mastiff had submitted to him so easily. Later, when Su-yi sat down cross-legged, the dark demon mastiff in front of him kept growling like a wolf. It seemed to be replying to Su-yi. Su-yi kept asking the dark demon mastiff all kinds of questions. At this point, Zhang Qing and the others finally believed it. Firstly, Su-yi had indeed subdued a dark demon mastiff in an instant. Secondly, Su-yi definitely knew beast language and could converse with these savage beasts. Cuckoo! Listening to Su-yi and the dark demon mastiff questions and answers, Zhang Qing, Su Jiehui, and Lu Ji gasped. They couldn't recover from their shock for a long time. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. This guy is too strong. Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, and the others couldn't calm down for a long time. From the moment Su-yi came to the 36 Sword Peak until now, everything he had shown was so powerful and terrifying. In less than an hour, Su-yi stood up and stretched. The dark demon mastiff stood respectfully beside Su-yi. Its eyes were filled with awe. Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, and the others could only be shocked from afar. They didn't dare to approach. A dark demon mastiff in the dark demon realm was not something they could deal with. However, if it wasn't for Su-yi, they would have been in trouble again. It could also be said that because of Su-yi, they really escaped a great disaster. Stand guard here. I'll be back soon. Su-yi asked the dark demon mastiff to protect Su Jiehui, Zhang Qing, and the others. He also asked Su Jiehui and the others to wait for him here for a while. With his eyes shining, Su-yi made up his mind and left in the dark night. Ew! The dark demon mastiff let out a deep roar and immediately sat down at the side. Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, and the others looked at each other. They looked at the dark demon mastiff and didn't dare to move. They were very afraid. It's okay. It probably won't attack us. Su Jiehui wasn't too afraid, but she also didn't dare to get too close to the dark demon mastiff. Taking advantage of the darkness, Su-yi found a secluded place. As for the wild beasts in the vicinity, Su-yi wasn't too worried about them. In the secluded cave, Su-yi moved a few boulders to cover the entrance before climbing in. Chapter 425. When he entered the mysterious space, an extremely dense energy of heaven and earth filled the air, as though it was trying to bind Su-yi. The space was filled with mist and dazzling lights. Upon closer inspection, the mist wasn't real mist, but the energy was so dense that it had turned into mist. The mysterious space, which was already quite vast, had expanded by more than 2 times under the observation of Su-yi's soul spirit. This is the benefit I got from the Heaven Ascension platform. Su-yi's heart skipped a beat as he immediately thought of the reason. When he was on the Heaven Ascension platform, Su-yi clearly felt that the mysterious ball of light in his mind had absorbed a huge amount of energy. It was much more powerful than any of the times he had been here before. At that time, Su-yi had already guessed how much benefit he could get from the mysterious space. Now that he had entered the mysterious space, Su-yi immediately felt the changes in the mysterious space. The dense energy was the densest in mysterious space. If he were to cultivate here, it would be many times stronger than the outside world. Spiritual liquid. When Su-yi arrived at the center of the mysterious space, the pool of spiritual liquid had expanded by half. At this moment, more than half of the spiritual liquid in the pool was radiating light. The intense energy fluctuations made people salivate. I'm rich. Su-yi was no longer the same person as when he was in the barbarian city. His state of mind was no longer the same as before, but he still couldn't help but be overjoyed. With the amount of spirit liquid in the spirit liquid pool, it was unknown how many bottles it could fill. How could Su-yi not know the value of the spiritual liquid? It was enough to tempt even a demon emperor. After a rough estimation, Su-yi estimated that this half pool of spirit liquid was enough to fill a few hundred bottles. A bottle of spiritual liquid was enough to give a barbarian beast endless benefits. It was also enough for a cultivator to make a breakthrough. The greatest benefit of the spiritual liquid was in the future. The spiritual liquid could cleanse one's marrow and transform one's body. If the spiritual liquid was sold, it would be worth at least as much as a yellow great elixir. It might even be worth more. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Su-yi didn't have much desire for these spiritual liquids. The benefits that these elixirs could bring to Su-yi had already been given to Su-yi by the mysterious space. Following which, Su-yi inspected the medicinal herbs and pills stored in the mysterious space. He discovered that the ordinary medicinal herbs had gradually transformed into spiritual herbs. Moreover, the efficacy of the spiritual herbs could be seen with the naked eye. It was unknown how much stronger the medicinal efficacy of the spiritual herbs were compared to before. Whether it was the medicinal fragrance or the color of those pills, they were all getting stronger. Even the pile of profound weapons and yuan weapons that he casually placed in the mysterious space seemed to be different from before. Comfortable, it's too comfortable. I feel like it's coming soon. The blood jade spirit ginseng's voice sounded. Light fluctuated, and the few leaves on top of it became bright green. Light fluctuated, and a fragrance filled the air. Grandpa Ginseng, how are you? Su-yi came to the side of the blood jade spirit ginseng. Looking at the aura fluctuations emanating from the blood jade spirit ginseng, he involuntarily swallowed his saliva. Brat, what do you want? The blood jade spirit ginseng subconsciously retreated. The blood-red roots on its body were tightly retracted. It still remembered what kind of person Su-yi was. Grandpa Ginseng, don't worry. This brat isn't much. Su-yi smiled embarrassedly. He had just broken through recently, so he didn't need the blood jade spirit ginseng's benefits to break through. Moreover, the blood jade spirit ginseng seemed to be preparing to undergo another tribulation. It probably wouldn't be affected. Hearing this, the blood jade spirit ginseng relaxed. It looked at Su-yi, and the leaves on top of its head moved slightly. Its gaze seemed to be moving as it said, "The energy of heaven and earth here has suddenly increased by a lot. I feel like I'll be able to undergo another tribulation soon. Congratulations, Grandpa Ginseng." Su-yi was happy. If the blood jade spirit ginseng could successfully undergo another tribulation, it would be able to reach the ethereal demon realm. At that time, no matter how serious his grandfather's injuries were, it would still be effective. Of course, Su-yi was truly happy for the blood jade spirit ginseng. It was extremely rare to be able to succeed after failing a tribulation. However, the blood jade spirit ginseng had succeeded, although it hadn't succeeded yet. Don't worry, I'll definitely do what I promised you. If it weren't for this space of yours, I wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Looking at Su-yi's thoughtful expression, the blood jade spirit ginseng thought that Su-yi was thinking about the request he had previously agreed to. Thank you, Grandpa Ginseng. Su-yi thanked with a smile. Brat, you seem to have improved a lot recently. You broke through so quickly? Then, the blood jade spirit ginseng looked at Su-yi with an unbearable shock in its eyes. The blood jade spirit ginseng still remembered that when it first saw Su-Yi, this brat was only at the profound origin realm. How long had it been since then? This brat had probably reached the profound origin realm now. The invisible aura also made the blood jade spirit ginseng feel that Su-Yi was probably stronger than before. He must have undergone another transformation. Slight improvement. Su-Yi smiled embarrassedly. He was quite satisfied with his recent improvement. What an abnormal brat. The blood jade spirit ginseng was shocked. It was the strongest expert. This brat was an anomaly. Then, in the mysterious space, Su-Yi sat cross-legged and began to work. Su-Yi had to deal with a large pile of space bags in his arms. The space bags of a group of inner disciples. The inner disciples of Shanjian Gate. Su-Yi reckoned that they should have a lot of gains. Then, as time passed, Su-Yi became familiar with the process. Under the effect of the mysterious space, as Su-Yi expected, these inner disciples had a lot of gains. However, it should be because they had entered the myriad sword battlefield that these inner disciples had a lot of elixirs on them. The number of elixirs in each spatial bag was already considered quite a lot among cultivators at the profound origin realm. These inner disciples probably knew the dangers of the myriad sword battlefield. Before entering, each of them had made all kinds of preparations. Elixirs were definitely indispensable. However, these inner disciples would never have thought that their space bags would be taken away not long after entering the myriad sword battlefield. After a full 4 hours, Su-Yi had a pile of origin stone powder in front of him with a smile on his face. There were more than 100 space bags and a lot of gains. There were hundreds of elixirs in total. Although they were all ordinary elixirs, Su-Yi was already very satisfied. As long as these elixirs were placed in the mysterious space, their medicinal effects would be enhanced. Chapter 426. Oh, under the night sky, the roars of beasts could be heard from afar. Coupled with the presence of the dark demon mastiff, Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, and the others were all trembling in fear. They no longer dared to meditate. However, as time passed, Lu Ji, Zhang Qing, Wang Fan, and the others were no longer as fearful of the dark demon mastiff as before. Su-Yi returned at dawn. Lord, the dark demon mastiff stood up. Its huge body was covered in a black radiance, and its pair of terrifying eyes were fluctuating with a terrifying light. Brother Su-Yi, Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, and the others immediately stood up. Everyone, let's continue. Su-Yi stretched his body. The air in the myriad sword battlefield was filled with dense heaven and earth energy. It was much denser than the heaven and earth energy at the Shinjian Gate. If one cultivated here for a long time, it would be twice the result with half the effort. It would be great if we could find some sword pattern stones. Try to find as many as possible. That way, Brother Su-Yi would be able to fight against the experts among the direct disciples. Zhang Qing said. He didn't have any hope for the sword pattern stones. Instead, he hoped that Su-Yi would be able to obtain the sword pattern stones and have the final battle of the Myriad Sword Conference. It is said that wherever there are sword pattern stones, there will be ferocious beasts or danger. Su Jiahui frowned. She knew that Su-Yi was powerful, but the Myriad Sword battlefield was not a safe place. Even the experts among the direct disciples could be killed. There's no hurry to find the sword pattern stones. Let's go first. Su-Yi smiled and said to the dark demon mastiff, let's go. Lead the way. Awoo. The dark demon mastiff nodded and let out a low growl. Its body was vigorous as it immediately drilled into the dense forest ahead. Brother Su-Yi, where are we going now? Zhang Qing was puzzled and asked Su-Yi, I'm going to do something big. When the time comes, everything will be done with half the effort. Su-Yi smiled mysteriously. Last night, from the dark demon mastiff, Su-Yi had learned a lot about the battlefield of myriad swords and had a clearer understanding of it. Within the myriad sword battlefield, there were quite a few barbaric beast leaders and barbaric beast kings that controlled the barbaric beasts within the myriad sword battlefield. Su-Yi, don't tell me you're going to look for the leader of those barbaric beasts? Starter Su Jiahui asked Su-Yi with her eyes wide open. Yesterday, when Su Yi asked about the dark demon mastiff, she and Zhang Qing were also there. In addition, Su Yi had asked the dark demon mastiff to lead the way. Su Jiahui couldn't help but suspect that Su Yi was going to take the initiative to look for the leader of the barbaric beasts. It's not a bad idea to find a few savage beasts as mounts. It'll be much more convenient. Su Yi smiled. After asking about the battlefield of myriad swords last night, he had already made a decision. Since everything here was related to the barbaric beasts, and it was said that there were barbaric beast experts in the places where the sword pattern stones were located, why not find a few barbaric beast leaders? Then, everything would be solved. We're really going to look for the leader of the barbaric beasts. Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and the others looked at each other. If it were any other time, they wouldn't have the guts to do so. They didn't even dare to deal with ordinary barbaric beasts, let alone those barbaric beast experts. However, with Su Yi by their side, Zhang Qing and the others became a lot bolder. They also had an inexplicable absolute confidence in Su Yi. The six of them continued on their journey. However, they had to admit that their luck wasn't too good. This was because the dark demon mastiff didn't follow them closely. Instead, it led the way under Su Yi's instructions. An hour later, Su Yi's group of 6 was surrounded by a group of inner and outer disciples. There were only a dozen inner disciples, but there were quite a number of outer disciples. There were around 40 to 50 of them. Judging from their expressions, they must have been robbed by the inner disciples and taken in as followers. I didn't expect there to be a few more. Let's bring them along. The leader of the group of inner disciples sneered when he saw the outer disciples walking over. However, at the same time, the sneer froze on his face. His expression was sluggish, and his eyes were filled with shock. So, among the group of inner disciples, there were gasps of astonishment. Someone recognized one of the 6 people. It was a young man with a broken sword on his back. There were probably not many people in the Shunjian Gate who didn't know who he was. Hello, everyone. Please be careful in the battlefield of myriad swords. Looking at the group of inner disciples, Su Yi smiled and greeted them from afar. At this moment, Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, Su Jiahui, and the others looked at the group of inner disciples and felt sorry for them. They were afraid that after a while, these inner disciples wouldn't even be able to cry. Indeed, as expected by Su Jiahui and the others, it only took a brief moment for more than 10 inner court disciples to lie on the ground in a disorderly manner. Their interspatial bags were kept by Su Yi enthusiastically. Then he left. For the next half of the day, Su Yi encountered 3 more groups of inner disciples like this. There were more than 100 of them in total. However, the result was the same. Su Yi was very enthusiastic. This must be the most miserable time for the inner disciples in the Myriad Swords Conference. Zhang Qing, Su Jiahui, Lu Ji, and the others were shocked when they saw the fate of the inner disciples, but they were also secretly happy. It had always been the inner sect disciples who bullied the outer sect disciples, but this time it was the other way around. As long as the inner sect disciples met Su Yi, they would definitely be in a miserable state. I wonder how many inner disciples there are in the battlefield of myriad swords. Su Yi's eyes moved. The space bag in his arms was stuffed to the brim. When one looked at it, one couldn't help but laugh. It's not a small number. More than 10,000. Zhang Qing replied. That's a lot. The corner of Su Yi's mouth curled into a half smile. If he could keep the interspatial bags of so many inner sect disciples, he would be rich. Let's not go overboard. There are quite a lot of inner disciples. Lu Ji thought that Su Yi was worried about the number of inner disciples. If so many inner disciples joined forces, it would not be easy to deal with them. Hee, Su Yi chuckled. He really hoped that he could meet a few more inner sect disciples. Roar! At this moment, a low roar of a beast was heard, coming from not far in front of them. It's the Dark Abyss demonic mastiff. Su Yi's eyes darkened. It was the Dark Abyss demonic mastiff's voice. Along the way, the Dark Abyss demonic mastiff hid and did not show itself. Roar! Soon, the dark abyss demonic mastiff pounced out from the messy mountain path. It looked a little panicked and landed directly beside Su-yi. He's injured. Chapter 427. It's injured. Su-yi raised his eyebrows and his face darkened. Whoosh, whoosh. Soon, the sound of wind breaking resounded in front of him. Dozens of figures came out from the dense forest and behind the boulders. They were all inner disciples of the Shinjin Gate. Every one of them had an extraordinary temperament and a strong aura. The one in the lead held a bow and loaded an arrow. About 30 inner disciples immediately surrounded the dark demon mastiff. Some of them also saw Su-yi, Lu Ji, Zhang Qing, and Su Jiawei. Unfortunately, none of the 30 inner disciples had seen Su-yi before. There were tens of thousands of inner disciples in the entire Shinjin Gate. Even if they had heard of Su-yi's name, none of them had seen Su-yi before. Get out of the way, or you'll have to bear the consequences. An arrogant inner disciple immediately scolded the outer disciples when he saw them. Why should I get out of the way? Su-yi had no intention of getting out of the way. His face was still calm. The dark demon mastiff stood in front of Su-yi with an ominous glint in its eyes. It imperceptibly protected Su-yi in front of it and stared at the inner disciples in front of it. Lu Ji, Zhang Qing, and Su Jiahui also had a slight change in their eyes. They could all see that Su-yi was displeased. Do you want to die? I told you to get out of the way. Don't disturb us from capturing this dark demon mastiff. Another inner disciple's sword glowed. It was obviously an extraordinary item that was about to reach the level of a spiritual weapon. Why should we get out of the way for you? You hurt my dark demon mastiff and still talk to me like that. You're probably used to being arrogant. Su-yi's eyes were no longer calm. He had subdued the dark demon mastiff, so it was by his side. Now that the dark demon mastiff was injured, these inner disciples were still so arrogant and condescending. This naturally angered Su-yi. Hearing Su-yi's words, the inner disciples were surprised. They had never seen an outer disciple who dared to talk to them like that in the Shinjin Gate. When arrogant outer disciple, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Looks like you've been taught a lesson. An inner disciple coldly stared at Su-yi and said, Let's capture this dark demon mastiff first. Maybe we can find the sword pattern stone. The young man with the bow and arrow seemed to be the leader of this group of inner sanctum disciples. He ordered his men to block the dark demon mastiff's escape route. Although the chances were slim, it would be better if they could find a way. If they could subdue the dark demon mastiff. Ayo! The dark demon mastiff let out a low growl, baring its fangs as it stared at the group of inner disciples in front of it. Hand over your interspatial bag and get lost. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Su-yi blinked his eyes and suppressed the anger in his heart. This was the battlefield of myriad swords. It was normal for these inner disciples to deal with barbaric beasts. They had nothing to do with him. However, he had already subdued the dark demon mastiff, so it was a different story. When Su-yi's words were heard, the inner disciples were stunned for a moment. Then, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Q update A. New most one fast previous I'm dying of laughter. An inner disciple laughed and looked at Su-yi with disdain. He didn't take him seriously at all. He said to the people around him, What a joke. Do the outer disciples nowadays think that they're extraordinary just because they can enter the battlefield of myriad swords? Well, since we're short of a few followers, we'll reluctantly take them in, said an inner disciple. They didn't surround the outer disciples at the beginning. They went in groups to look for the sword pattern stone and various opportunities first. You're not qualified to take us in as followers. I advise you to leave your interspatial bag and leave. Otherwise, no one can save you later, Zhang Qing said. These inner disciples didn't take the outer disciples seriously at all. He was a little angry, but at the same time, he reminded these inner disciples. What a rare sight. Among the outer disciples in the Shinjin Gate, these few can be considered unique, sneered an inner disciple. Don't talk nonsense with them. Capture the dark demon mastiff, and then deal with these outer disciples. A young man said. He wanted to capture the dark demon mastiff first, and then teach Su Yi, Zhongqing, and the other the lesson. In his eyes, the dark demon mastiff was the only one he feared. It wouldn't be too late to teach these outer disciples a lesson later. I'll say it one last time. Leave your interspatial bag and get lost. Su, he said again. His face was completely gloomy. How dare you? You're courting death. Finally, these inner disciples were angry. These outer disciples didn't take them seriously, which completely infuriated them. Whoosh! A figure rushed out. Vitality fluctuated under the soles of his feet. The figure flew around the dark demon mastiff and directly stabbed at Su Yi with his sword. The sword radiance filled the air. There was a sharp sword sheath that stabbed at Su Yi's chest. Humph! Su Yi's figure didn't move. He let out a cold snort and shook his arm. There was a red light fluctuation in his hand as he stretched out 2 fingers. Just as the sword was about to stab his chest, the tip of the sword was caught between his fingers. Buzz! The sword roared and made a vibrating sound. The inner disciple's face changed instantly. The sword in his hand seemed to be frozen and couldn't move an inch. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't pull it back. How could this inner disciple not be shocked by such an unforeseen event? Get lost, Su, he shouted. The red light in his fingers suddenly became bright, and a wave of energy gushed out. Crack, crack. The sword roared and was immediately enveloped by the red light. Then, the inner disciple's face was filled with shock. The sword cracked and shattered inch by inch. PFFF, the young man spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was sent flying and heavily smashed onto the ground. Everything happened in an instant. Before the group of inner disciples could react, the young man was already lying on the ground. The disdainful faces froze and gradually turned into shock. An inner disciple at the 7th level of the Yuan profound realm wasn't a match for an outer disciple. More importantly, it was a treasure sword at the level of a profound weapon. It had actually been shattered. That outer disciple was actually so terrifyingly powerful. The inner disciple from before kept on screaming. His limbs twitched and blood dripped from his mouth. Whoosh! Suddenly, the bow-wielding young man who was the leader had a shocked expression. He immediately drew his bow and shot an arrow at Sui. Be careful, Su Jiahui shouted. Her expression changed as she warned Sui. The sharp arrow pierced through the air and instantly pierced through Su Yi's chest. However, after the sharp arrow pierced through, Su Yi's body dissipated. There wasn't any blood flowing out. Su Yi. Chapter 428. The young leader of the inner sect disciples also revealed a look of joy, but it only lasted for a moment before it froze on his face. His pupils constricted as he saw the young man's figure getting closer and closer. Bang! A low muffled sound came from the young man's chest. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Blood sprayed everywhere as he landed heavily in the distance. Su Yi's figure appeared. His unfettered footwork was now even more powerful than before. Seeing that Su Yi was unharmed, Su Jiahui, Zhongqing, and the others breathed a sigh of relief. It was scary but not dangerous. They smiled bitterly in their hearts. With Su Yi's strength, how could these inner sect disciples be a match for him? Quick, let's attack together. This outer sect disciple is strange and powerful. Let's attack together. The surrounding inner sect disciples finally regained their senses. Their expressions changed greatly as they immediately attacked together. Swish, 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 swish. Rays of sword aura swept out as the group of inner sect disciples attacked. They did not hold back their profound origin realm aura. The sword aura enveloped Su Yi as the sharp sword aura swept the surrounding sand and stones. However, Zhongqing and Su Jiahui were already used to this situation. They were not worried at all. Bang, bang, bang. Screams, muffled sounds, and mouthfuls of dark red blood were heard. One by one, the inner sect disciples fell to the ground. They were seriously injured. It was a tragic sight. Amidst the wails, Su Yi did not hold back. He took everything from these inner sect disciples. Then, he pulled out the arrows from the dark demon mastiff body and left with the mastiff, Su Jiahui, and the others. At this point, the inner sect disciples finally believed that the dark demon mastiff really belonged to the young man. They wanted to find a way to subdue the dark demon mastiff, but the chances were slim. They did not expect that the young man had already subdued it. After a while, they found a quiet place. Su Yi treated the dark demon mastiff's injuries and applied some spiritual medicine on it. "Thank you, sir." The dark demon mastiff was grateful. It was leading the way, but it did not expect to encounter dozens of humans and almost be captured. "How much further?" Su Yi asked. "My lord, we should be arriving soon. However, I usually travel alone, so I don't know the leader. There should be more and more savage demon beasts around here." The dark demon mastiff replied in beast language and informed Su Yi, "Lead the way. Be careful." Su Yi waved his hand and continued on their way. Gradually, the group walked out of the forest, and a towering mountain peak appeared in front of them. Strange craggy rocks and towering trees were scattered on the mountain peak, like giant umbrellas covering the sky. Oh! The roars of many beasts came from all directions, causing Zhang Qing, Su Jiahui, and the others' expressions to turn serious. They circulated their yuan qi and were on high alert. Awoo! Soon, numerous barbaric beasts emerged from the foot of the mountain and surrounded Su Yi and the others. In the air, there were more than 10 flying savage beasts circling and flapping their wings. Their eyes were sharp as they stared at Su Yi and the others. Oh! The roars of the beasts were like thunder, shaking the void. Zhang Qing and the others' expressions changed as they trembled in fear. At this moment, there were more than 100 barbaric beasts. They had never seen such a scene. Awoo! The dark demon mastiff raised its head and roared, opening its ferocious mouth. Su Yi looked at the barbaric beasts that were surrounding them. His expression remained unchanged. The aura of these barbaric beasts was only at the profound demon realm. The strongest among them were only at the 9th level of the profound demon realm. Su Yi did not release the aura of the primordial chaos supreme technique from his body. However, the aura that he emitted from his body was enough to make these brute demon beasts tremble and feel uneasy for no reason. Su Yi's body was calm, but there was an invisible aura being emitted from his body. After cultivating the Origin Supreme technique and being refined by the mysterious space, this aura had gradually merged with Su Yi's. It had already merged with Su Yi's aura. Therefore, Su Yi did not circulate the Origin Supreme technique. This allowed the barbaric beasts to feel his aura and not dare to approach him. They felt uneasy for no reason. "My lord wants to see your leader." The dark demon mastiff roared and spoke to the surrounding barbaric beasts. Screech! A sharp screech pierced through the clouds and cracked the rocks. A ferocious bird with a wingspan of several feet swooped down from the mountain peak. The ferocious bird was covered in golden light, emitting from its golden feathers. It was like a golden sun, dazzling and sharp, enveloping its body. From afar, the bird looked like a sun descending, accompanied by a sharp and ferocious aura. Heavens, that's the profound, sun-golden demonic falcon. Su Jiahui's face changed. That was actually a profound, sun-golden demonic falcon. It was an extremely powerful barbaric beast that was rumored to be very powerful. 2nd level demon spirit realm. Su Yi raised his head and looked at the profound, sun-golden demonic falcon. This was an extraordinary barbaric beast. Its bloodline was comparable to the barbaric heavenly leopard, and it was even above the dark demon mastiff. Su Yi never imagined that he would see a profound, sun-golden demonic falcon so soon after entering the myriad soar battlefield. A 2nd level demon spirit realm barbaric beast. This was enough to prove how dangerous the myriad soar battlefield was to the disciples of the Xinjiang Gate. At the very least, there shouldn't be many outer and inner disciples that could deal with it. The consequences of encountering it were imaginable. "It's you again, Dark Demon Mastiff. Are you here to pledge your allegiance?" the profound sun golden demonic falcon said to the dark demon mastiff. However, the ferocious glint in its sharp eyes fell onto Su-yi as if it had sensed something. "This is my lord. You should pledge your allegiance." The dark demon mastiff roared in beast language. It recognized the profound sun golden demonic falcon. The dark demon mastiff wanted it to pledge its allegiance, but it refused. However, the profound sun golden demonic falcon didn't make things difficult for it. "You actually pledged your allegiance to a human?" The profound sun golden demonic falcon's gaze sunk as it coldly stared at the dark demon mastiff. Then, its pupils contracted to Su-yi. "Human, you're courting death for having designs on my demon race." In an instant, the Xianyang golden demon falcon let out a sharp screech, and golden light burst out from its wings. Its ferocious aura immediately covered the sky and earth and poured down with a rumbling sound. It swooped down towards Su-yi. To the demon race, it's natural for them to feel unhappy that a human had designs on them and subdued a barbaric beast as a mount. "Impudent beast!" A faint shout came out from Su-yi's throat. In an instant, Su-yi's robe shook as a vast aura swept out. Scarlet light pervaded the air. Su-yi was like a god of war standing tall on the ground. His entire body was enveloped in scarlet light, causing his body to seem even more extraordinary and majestic. The profound sun golden demonic falcon's ferocious aura swept out. However, it was blocked by the invisible aura on Su-yi's body in an instant. A domineering and destructive aura gushed out. Su-yi's robe fluttered in the wind, but he didn't move at all. The Xianyang golden demonic falcon, which was charging down at lightning speed, came to a halt in an instant. Its fierce eyes were filled with shock and fear in an instant. With trembling eyes, the Xianyang golden demon falcon stared at Su-yi in astonishment, its body trembling uncontrollably. Chapter 429. Awoo! The surrounding beasts roared. Their bodies trembled, and they prostrated themselves in awe. Their ferocious eyes became docile, and there was no more ferocity. This scene shocked Zhang Qing and the others. They looked at each other and were moved. Su-yi's performance was too shocking, and it shocked them. Su-yi retracted his aura and put away the Origin Supreme technique. He smiled. After a while, in the cave where the beasts were entrenched, a palm-sized stone appeared in Su-yi's hand. It was shaped like a sword, and it was completely black. It was covered with sword patterns. It was unknown what kind of material it was made of, but it was extremely hard and smooth like jade. "Is this the sword pattern stone?" Su-yi looked at the stone in his hand. Was this a sword pattern stone? He could not feel any energy fluctuations from it. The material was very special, but there was nothing else special about it. He did not know why the Divine Sword sect was looking for these sword pattern stones. This is the sword pattern stone. The last 68 disciples who have the most sword pattern stones will be able to go to the Lingjian Peak to fight. Su Jiahui said. Su-yi kept the sword pattern stone in his space bag. Perhaps the Xinjiang Gate put the sword pattern stone in so that the disciples could fight for it. Those who could get the most sword pattern stones would naturally be the most extraordinary. It is said that after this sword pattern stone is taken out, you can exchange it for the corresponding points in the gate. Lu Ji said, this sword pattern stone was too far away for them, so they didn't ask much about it. They only heard about it by accident. Is that so? Su-yi was suddenly interested. If this was the case, he could collect as many sword pattern stones as possible. In the cave, the Xianyang golden demon falcon was prostrating on the ground. Its feathers were shining with golden light, and it stood beside Su-yi in awe. The aura of the human just now made it feel an unprecedented fear. The pressure that came from the depths of the bee soul made it know that the human in front of it was very scary. It was probably much stronger than the rumored demon race's aura. On you, edition chapter, as for the sword pattern stone, Su-yi had obtained it from the Xianyang golden demon falcon. Just as Su-yi had guessed, there was indeed a sword pattern stone on the body of the leader of the barbaric beasts. Where are these sword pattern stones usually found? Su Yi asked the Xianyang Golden Demon Falcon. This was the leader of the beasts in the battlefield of 10,000 swords. It should know a lot about this place. Sir, there are only a few sword-patterned stones, but they're all guarded by powerful beings. A king told us to guard them well. The Xianyang Golden Demon Falcon replied. Is there a king of savage beasts here? Su Yi asked with a frown. Yes. His cultivation is very strong, but he almost never shows himself. He only tells us to guard these sword-patterned stones and not let them fall into the hands of humans. The Xianyang Golden Demon Falcon did not hide anything, but there were many things that it did not know. This battlefield of 10,000 swords has indeed been set up. Su Yi's eyes lit up. He wasn't surprised. The ancestors of Shunjian Gate should have subdued the king beasts and placed them in the battlefield of 10,000 swords. On one hand, it was to train the disciples entering the battlefield of 10,000 swords. On the other hand, it was to prevent any accidents. The young disciples of Shunjian Gate had all entered the battlefield of 10,000 swords to train. Although this was a real training, the Shunjian Gate didn't dare to be too bold. They didn't dare to put all the young disciples of Shunjian Gate and their personal disciples in an uncontrollable environment. Those personal disciples were the foundation of Shunjian Gate in the future. Nothing must happen to them. Everything must be within their control. Are we going to continue? Zhang Qing asked Su Yi. She was a little excited. Su Yi was able to subdue the king beasts and could speak the beast language. This was an absolute advantage in the battlefield of 10,000 swords. If this went on, they would definitely be able to obtain a lot of sword-pattern stones. No, you guys can stay here for a few days. Su Yi looked at Zhang Qing, Su Jiahui, and the rest with a serious face. Stay for a few days? Su Jiahui and the rest were confused. With their speed, they might not be able to walk out of the battlefield of 10,000 swords in a month. If they stayed here for a few days, they might not be able to walk out of the battlefield of 10,000 swords. Su Yi looked at Su Jiahui and the rest and smiled. He knew what they were thinking. If staying here for a few days can increase your cultivation by a lot, are you willing to stay? As for the battlefield of 10,000 swords, you will naturally be able to walk out by then. Su Yi had always wanted to thank Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the rest. When he was brought back to the 36 Sword Peak by Elder Su, it was all thanks to the care of these outer disciples, especially Su Jiahui. Therefore, at this moment, Su Yi wanted to give Su Jiahui and the others some benefits before the personal disciples came in. At that time, Su Jiahui and the others would have more power to protect themselves. After all, he couldn't always protect them by their side. The only way to be strong was to be strong. This was a logic that Su Yi had always understood. Can increase cultivation by a lot? Hearing this, not to mention Lu Ji, Wang Fan, Zhang Qing, and the others, even the eyes on Su Jiahui's delicate and pretty face instantly brightened as she was moved. To them, the temptation of not having a sudden increase in cultivation was even greater. Brother Su Yi, is this true? Zhang Qing looked at Su Yi with great anticipation. She was afraid that Su Yi was just joking. If their cultivation could increase, then they would have achieved their goal of entering the battlefield of 10,000 swords. Su Yi smiled and said to the group, "Prepare to go into seclusion for a few days. As for how much you can benefit from it, that will depend on you." Brother Su Yi, are you really going to give it to us? We have nothing to repay you with. A moment later, in the cave, Su Yi took out a few small jade bottles and handed them to Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, and the rest. Zhang Qing and the rest were very grateful. Holding the jade bottles in their hands, they could feel the energy fluctuations. These are probably not ordinary items, and Su Yi was actually giving them to them unconditionally. This made them feel very grateful. Normally, in the Shunjian Gate, the inner disciples would only rob them of their benefits, consume the spiritual liquid, and refine it. However, the medicinal effect of this spiritual liquid is very strong. I'm afraid you will suffer a lot. I hope you can endure it. Su Yi smiled. This spiritual liquid was just to thank Su Jiahui and the rest for taking care of them. Especially during this period of time on the 36 Sword Peak, Su-yi could feel that although these outer disciples were not strong, they were very loyal and had feelings for each other. Although this spiritual liquid was priceless, and Su-yi was also a greedy person, there were some things that were more valuable to Su-yi than these spiritual liquids. We will definitely be able to endure it. Brother Su-yi, thank you. Zhang Qing and the rest thanked him. Chapter 430. Su-yi was relieved to let Su Jiahui and the rest cultivate in seclusion here. This was the nest of the Xianyang golden demon falcon. There were many savage beasts here. Before the direct disciples came in, the inner disciples wouldn't have the strength to barge in. The black-held demonic mastiff was also injured. After taming the black-held demonic mastiff, Su-yi was not stingy. He took out a few good healing elixirs and gave them to the black-held demonic mastiff so that it could recuperate in the cave. As for the spiritual liquid in the mysterious space, it had a great effect on these savage beasts. However, these were savage beasts in the myriad sword battlefield. Su-yi didn't know if he could bring them out. Therefore, he couldn't bear to part with the spiritual liquid. After all, the value of the spiritual liquid couldn't be compared to elixirs. In the cave, Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the rest sat down cross-legged and consumed the spiritual liquid. Instantly, their bodies were covered in light, and there were energy ripples in their bodies. The black-held demonic mastiff swallowed the elixirs and healed. After arranging everything, Su-yi walked out of the cave and ordered the Xianyang golden demon falcon to guard the cave. "Sir, are we going somewhere?" The Xianyang golden demon falcon looked at Su-yi and flapped its wings. It could feel that Su-yi had something planned. The leaders of the savage beasts in this area should have sword-patterned stones, right? Su-yi smiled as he stretched his back. This vast battlefield of 10,000 swords seemed a little interesting. They should have them. From what I know, there are some dangerous places with sword-patterned stones. The Xianyang golden demon falcon replied, "No hurry. Let me look for the leaders of the savage beasts first. You know where their nest is, right?" Su-yi said, "Yes, but there are many leaders of the savage beasts here. Some of them even have more sword-patterned stones." The Xianyang golden demon falcon said, "Just as I thought. Hee hee." A smile appeared on Su-yi's face as the corners of his lips curled up. He had a plan in mind. Hula! Then, the golden light expanded, and the Xianyang golden demon falcon spread its wings and soared into the sky, disappearing into the low altitude. Not long after, a shocking beast roar could be heard from dozens of miles away. A white demonic leopard that was several feet long was crawling in front of Su-yi. At dusk, in a winding canyon, the endless roars of beasts shook the valley. A barbaric beast that resembled both a serpent and a dragon was curled up in front of Su-yi. It had a single horn on its ferocious head, and its tongue flicked in and out of its mouth. Time passed slowly, and it had already been several days since they entered the myriad sword battlefield. All the inner and outer core disciples had a certain understanding of the environment of the battlefield of myriad swords. This was especially true for the outer sect disciples. Almost all of them had been taken in as followers by the inner sect disciples. Whenever there was a dangerous place, they would be the first ones to scout the way, so they knew how dangerous it was. Oh, bang, bang. Every now and then, these outer and inner sect disciples would be attacked by the barbaric beasts. They would be injured and filled with danger, but they would also be rewarded. The myriad sword battlefield was a mysterious and ancient space. There were many opportunities in it, and the most common ones were herbs. Some of them were even spiritual herbs. These herbs were very valuable, and they could be exchanged with the Xinjiang Gate for pills. It was rumored that there were some scattered divine weapons in the battlefield of myriad swords, and those who were lucky would be able to find them. Be careful of Su-yi. He will rob anyone he sees. That Su-yi is too strong. We can't afford to offend him before the personal disciples come in. If you see Su-yi, avoid him immediately. Guard against fire, theft, and Su-yi. In the past few days, the news spread among the inner sect disciples who were scattered across the myriad sword battlefield. Guard against fire, theft, and Su-yi. No one wanted to see that guy. However, these inner sect disciples worried too much. These days, Su-yi did not have the time to pay attention to them. Su-yi had been too busy for the past few days. Riding on the Xianyang Golden Demon Falcon, he had traveled across half of the battlefield of 10,000 swords. With his art of time immemorial supreme, he had subdued the leaders of the savage beasts and searched for herbs. How would he have the time to trouble these inner disciples? However, these inner core disciples had never imagined that it wouldn't be long before an eternal nightmare and blow would descend upon them. 8 days later, on a mountain peak that pierced through the clouds, the surroundings were shrouded in mist. On one side of the mountain peak, 3 sides were empty. Behind it was a cliff, and in front of it was a misty cloud. Ancient trees were growing among the rocks, and they looked strong and vigorous. Su-yi stood quietly on a huge rock on the cliff. His robe and black hair fluttered in the wind. The broken sword on his back was very eye-catching. In his firm and deep eyes, there was a flash of red light. Awu! The low roar of a beast echoed in the forest. Awu! Guji! In the distant mountains, the roar of a beast reverberated endlessly. Ferocious birds flapped their wings, stirring up the wild. In front of Su-yi, there was a group of barbaric beasts crawling and attacking. There was a demon falcon with golden feathers, a huge snake that looked like a dragon or python, a demon leopard that was completely white and covered in scales, and a huge black bull that had 4 pillar-like limbs. There were no less than 30 barbaric beasts in total. All of them were the heads of the barbaric beasts in the myriad sword battlefield. At this moment, they were all gathered together and crawling in front of Su-yi in fear and respect. If anyone saw this scene, they would be dumbfounded. Su-yi's lips curled into a smile. He looked at the group of barbaric beasts in front of him and seemed to be in a good mood. Especially with the 43 sword pattern stones in his hands, Su-yi was even happier. Lord, the territory of the king is just ahead. The danger is getting greater and greater. There are many places that we don't dare to go. A serpent-like barbaric beast informed Su-yi in beast language. Its tongue flickered, emitting a terrifying fishy smell. This was a leader of the barbaric beasts. Its cultivation was stronger than the Xianyang Golden Demon Falcon. But before Su-yi, even a demon spirit realm beast would be suppressed and subdued. It's about time. Su-yi raised his eyes and looked ahead. According to the leader of the barbaric beasts, there was a barbaric beast king ahead. Many of the barbaric beasts were strong and dangerous. Calculating the time, they had already traversed more than half of the myriad sword battlefield. With the Xianyang Golden Demon Falcon flying, they didn't have to travel by foot. Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the rest were still in seclusion. It was about time for them to make a breakthrough. Let's follow the plan. Su-yi waved his hand. Awu! The leaders of the barbaric beasts bowed and left. There were also ferocious birds that spread their wings and disappeared into the sky. Lord, are we going back now? The Xianyang Golden Demon Falcon asked. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.